Hello everyone and welcome to our brand new Horse Games podcast. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Rattle and I have some wonderful guests here who were willing to chat with me today about, well, horse games. We have a lot to cover, but first I'm going to let these awesome people introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Abigail Pinehaven. I make content on YouTube and Instagram, and you can find my links in the description below.
Hi, I'm Moon, aka Daniella Moonstar, and I also do YouTube videos, and I also post stuff on Facebook and Instagram, so check out my links in the description below as well.
I'm Nyx. I'm an aspiring writing instructor and photographer. I have some general experience in the horse world and in horse video games.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here today. So just to kind of cover what we're all going to be talking about, Moon will be chatting about the history of horse games. I will be chatting about horse games versus games with horses. Abigail will be covering the horse gaming community, and Nyx, our local horse master, will be covering male representation in horse games. And that is our lineup. And also just a big thank you. I think we can all say thank you to Liv Opalrock for our wicked avatars. Are you guys excited?
Yes, let's go.
Okay, cool. Let's get into it.
Alright, so we're going to be talking about the history of horse games, but more specifically, the evolution of horse games. So, over the years, horse games as a genre have evolved in many different ways, from graphics to even incorporation of different features. Regardless of how old other horse games are, they're still able to bring charm, joy, and nostalgia when it comes to revisiting them, especially ones from people's childhoods. However, most horse games unfortunately typically have the same formula whenever it comes to the appearance, what's available in the game, etc. So for starters, I'm gonna give y'all a beautiful timeline since, as y'all know from my videos, since y'all know me, I love my timelines and time periods. So we're gonna start from basically the very first batch of horse games to the present time, aka kind of like the future. So do any of y'all have any questions before I start breaking down the timeline?
Ooh, are you going to actually start like at the very, very beginning of horse games? Like what year is that?
Specifically 1999, because I'm excluding the Barbie games since they're not necessarily equestrian related, so we're strictly talking about a core horse game.
Okay,
general.
cool.
Okay,
Alright.
is there any particular console or medium that you're going to be excluding?
Not necessarily, because I try to at least keep as what's available in terms of consoles, because there's not really much horse games on stuff that's like an actual console, like PS4s, Nintendo Switch, that sort of thing. Most of them are on PC, some are on Wii and Nintendo, but that's really about it, besides like some are on mobile and some being on like generic consoles, but yes, sort of. Alright, so we're gonna start with the time period from 1999 to 2001, and I call this the early stage of horse games. So to start by looking at the timeline, this was like the first time people were starting to try to make equestrian-like games, not related to something like Barbie or some kid franchise. So here we see games like Mary King's Riding Star, the very first Let's Ride game with Rosamund Hill, Riding Champion, and the Equestrian Showcase. Obviously, the graphics weren't the best at that time, however this was revolutionary at the time since horses in general are just generally hard to animate, and this was basically also the first time we see an attempt at a story format in a horse game. In Rosamund Hill / Riding Champion, they're basically the same thing roughly, but just different titles based on where you're from. And this is also where we see for the other ones, the first general attempt of trying to do like an equestrian rider simulator. So the first question we're going to be asking is, how would these games set the foundation for the horse games to come after this period?
Wow, that's actually a very big question. I think it set the tone for what horse games would eventually become, and they kind of go into a groove, if I have to say. They kind of fall into a groove from here on out. I don't really think they deviate much from what they were in the beginning, but you're going to show us if it does actually deviate a lot.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Rattle. I haven't played with a lot of the really early games because I'm not actually that old, but I have noticed a lot of the titles do come from like series and movies, so you can see sort of at the beginning people are trying to make that breakthrough on horse games, and it's funny because looking at this, I can kind of see a lot of titles kind of bunched together between sort of 2010 and 2015. But I think if you were to actually play those games, a lot of them are kind of similar, as Rattle was sort of saying, and it isn't until we get to like post 2015 that we sort of see more diversity within the game mechanics as well as graphics and style and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, brilliantly said. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, because especially like since in this period, since this was very early, because especially like once you start getting to later periods, you can tell that the marketing has especially changed over time, from using like realistic pictures to starting to have more art-based or more cartoon-related titles in general, which is why I find it very interesting, considering since also this was just in general very hard to find games this early way back, because they generally really just came during the late 1990s, really.
If I can actually add on to that, which is pretty interesting, I know that you cut it off from 1999 to avoid the Bargui games, which is very interesting though, is that there was actually earlier games with horses and they were like DOS game RPGs.
Wow.
Yeah, and they had like a little horsey that kind of ran around on the screen. It was all 2D, but it was interesting that even from that early on, like horse games were trying to kind of, games were trying to implement horses into gaming essentially.
So now we're gonna go into 2002, 2010, and I call this the golden age of horse games because this is where I believe this is where there's just a huge boom in horse games. So we start to see a lot of companies like Viva Media, ValueSoft, Ubisoft, and others starting to try to jump onto this horse game bandwagon, and we start to see a lot of birth of iconic series such as Tip of Funnel series, Pets Horse Club / Meta Champion, depending on where you're from, Horse Life series, My Horse and Me, Riding Academy, Starshine Legacy, and of course Star Stable Seasons. And this is also where I like to point out that this is where the Let's Ride series starts to especially grow, with bringing in new mechanics and approaches to cross-country dressage and show jumping. And this is where we also start to see other games trying to take more disciplines outside of the English ones, such as Western riding, and as well as uncommon disciplines like in Appassionata, where they do actual Appassionata. And this is where I generally believe where we start to see more additions of male character customization, even though very few games did this, and there's also some games where they start to use equestrian stars such as Lucinda Green, and other medias from shows like Saddle Club or movies like Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron. However, a lot of these horse games had a similar repetitive formula when it came to the mechanic with some of the disciplines, story writing, horse care, etc. With this big boom of horse games, what games or game series was the most memorable for you that made a huge impact on you, and why?
Ooh, Peppa Funnel. that's like the first one that pops into mind. Peppa Funnel.
Honestly, I'm not gonna lie, that's a good choice.
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say this is actually the part where I jumped into horse games. Was this boom? I didn't even know about the Punisher. What was that discipline you said?
Appassionata. It's essentially basically a discipline where, like Liberty is basically picked that into a show format where they do not just one but like multiple horses. Sometimes they start out with one, sometimes start with 3, sometimes even up to like 5. You can sometimes see this in circuses, but usually like this kind of stuff is like its own show, and it's usually like as like very fantasy or like mystical, that sort of thing. And they're generally hard to find, but they are kind of still around, just not as much. You have to basically catch them if you see them.
Oh, I see. But yeah, no, the Peppa Funnel was the Stud Farm Inheritance, was the first like true horse game I ever played.
Yeah, I'm so glad you have like this timeline, because I would not be able to remember like half of these titles had they not been in front of me. Because
I look for every single game in here.
So like it's a huge chart. It's such a huge chart.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I know you haven't.
I would have broke that timeline.
Yeah. I know you haven't included it, but my first horse game was Barbie Horse Adventures. But from here, it was actually Bella Sarah. I don't know if anybody else had played Bella Sarah. I basically got this book because there's like a book series, and in the book it had like a code in it, and you went to the website. And I think this is generally, I'm not even kidding, the first time I had actually been on the internet myself.
Oh, wow.
Was to play this Bella Sarah game. I was such a menace. I would print out all of the horses constantly. I burnt through paper. But yeah, Bella Sarah was like one of the first, I think, actual games that I played on PC, because before that, it had been real life physical toys that I had been playing with. So definitely for me, Ballacera was kind of the turning point of like, that was when the craving began. I needed more. I needed to consume much more horse content than I currently was doing.
Yeah, for me it has to be Lucinda Green's From Here. That was my favorite game. I just liked that you didn't really have to stick to a storyline. It was kind of just get out there and do horsey things. It was quite good.
For me, I'd say like the most memorable has to be Pet's Horse Club, aka Magic Champion Rider, because I believe that game specifically was the first time I saw like horse game story format based, and that one was the most memorable because I had a lot of fun from trying to get specific horses I want from the breeding system, trying to make sure I do the championships right, etc. And I just remembered a lot of memories just replaying that game over and over. And I feel like that kind of like similar with Abigail, that's what like put my initial drive to get more horse games. Because literally since that, basically as a kid, from like whenever I discovered like Amazon, and I would basically point out a horse game to like my parents, and I would basically like write that down as like a lot on my Christmas wish list or birthday wish list, like stuff like that. So, if do any of y'all have any other points before we move on to the next period?
All that I want to say about this period is I'm just so surprised, now that we have it on a chart like this, like between like 2012, I can't get the years now, but I mean, there's so many good horse games that came out. Like, why did it stop? It's kind of sad.
All right, so now we're going into 2011 and 2015, and this is what I like to basically call the birth of horse MMOs and a lot of horse mobile games. This is where you start to see Alicia Online and Star Stable Online come to life, and there were still some horse games such as Ride Equestrian Simulation, some last installations of the Horse Life series, and a few others. As for mobile games, mainly I would say from like most memorable, if I try to put all the mobile horse games, this would break the chart completely. So to mention a few, we have the My Horse app and Horse Haven World Adventures. And this is also where we start to see, unfortunately, horse game scams like Riding High, or just abandoned ones like Riding Out. And in general, this is kind of just I like to call like basically the post-golden age of horse games, because this is where we kind of start to see not much are really coming out, but it's like gradual. So the next question is, what do y'all think this was at the time where people either started to make more mobile horse games than per se like more MMOs or regular horse games?
Well, I have sort of noticed that, just sort of comparing the two periods, that because I sort of grew up with the golden era, I didn't have access to all of the games before that. But if we kind of actually look at the titles, there's a lot of them that are on, for example, the Wii, or I think I played Pony Friends on the little Nintendo 3DS kind of thing. So there's a lot more mediums kind of going, and at the time, buying cartridges, buying discs, buying DVDs was essential, basically. The same, even taking Bellacera, for instance, you needed the books to get the card to, get online sort of thing. There was a card trading game as well. So there was a physical element to these games. Whereas when we kind of go into post, this is when DVDs and that are kind of being phased out, because the internet's here now and we're all sharing and pirating games. So when this sort of happens, I think, of course, there's opportunity, as you said, for the like MMO games, but then there's also this dying of these traditional companies, for instance, doing horse games, because suddenly nobody's buying discs anymore. The Wii is kind of dying out. The Nintendo franchise has kind of moved off into a different kind of section. So it's really interesting to see this as we move sort of, as you said, like mobile kind of comes into it. Suddenly we have, I don't want to say a blanket statement of like a drop in quality, but you definitely see sort of like a difference in, the content that we're being given and the medium that we're getting it in. So I'm really glad you've done this timeline, because it's just like, it's blowing my mind looking at this now.
I see stuff like starters orders and those types of games, which is far more simulaty. Like Ride is definitely I love that game. I've played it like a million times before, but it's a very simulation type style game, as well as starters orders. And if I have my dates correct, I think the G1 Jockey series also started during this era. And I find it interesting that we see a lot more simulations coming out, but then like all the other kind of story-driven, more charming games, I suppose you would call them, kind of die out in favor of these style games. And then the MMOs, which like boomed. Like it's interesting that the MMOs boomed, not the that's kind of odd for me. Like MMOs like skyrocketed essentially.
I feel like also like another reason why like MMO started to skyrocket because for Alicia, since it was basically taking a newer concept to horse racing by putting a fantasy element, and as well as adding things such as like using your money at the time before it got rebirthed as a phoenix into the one that we have now that you can get everything for free for, and then Star Stable just starting out in 2011 where we start to have like a callback of Starshine Legacy from the previous era, and people starting to hop onto that because they're like, oh, I remember this from my childhood, I want to go to there. Or people just from newer kids being like, ooh, I like this. And it starts to gravitate more, especially because I feel like now this is where we start to see people like, oh, we can make money like this if it's in an MMO or mobile format. And especially for like app ones, like with Horsehaven World Adventures, if I get that title correctly, that one was more kind of based off like some other mobile games where like kind of like you do farming or decoration and have a normal currency that you can earn in game or a currency that you can earn in game but not that much, so you can pay money to do it. And this is kind of also where I feel like we start to see a lot based off of patience in terms of wanting to work your way gradually and patiently.
Yeah, I know we're going to get to the mobile section, but oh boy, yeah, horse games are infested with mobile games, and I'm really sad about that fact.
A lot of them even have like graphics that are just like, ew. Some they look nice, some either look really bad. Some
The funny thing is that there was a little game, and I don't know if you have it on this thing. I'm not seeing it. It was something about Ubisoft. They made it. It lasted for about a year, but it looked really good, and it was a mobile game, and you could free roam. And I accidentally came across its trailer, but it was, I think, 2016, I think it came out, but it didn't last for like longer than a year, and then it just died out.
I need to see like a visual because I have no idea what
I'm gonna have to send you the video.
Yeah. I have no idea.
I'll slap something on the screen. I'll slap something on the
something
screen.
I might have looked at, but then just forgot about in the back of my brain because of high school. But yeah,
I just wondered why there was such like a switch to the MMOs, because it looked like they were going quite strong with all the single player titles, and I wonder if they had started to sort of exhaust all the ideas. You know how most of these games or even like movies have this sort of generic idea of like of what a horse experience is. So I wonder if they sort of decided that they had enough of that and branched to a more MMO sort of open world kind of thing. It's quite
Possibly.
interesting to see. Yeah.
I mean, I also have the question of like, if you looked at general like gaming titles at the time, would you also see a similar sort of pattern of, you know, the single player, I don't know, like Uncharted sort of games, Resident Evil, that kind of stuff, and then you go on to like, you know, Skyrim suddenly coming out, and it's this, I mean, I know Skyrim's not an MMO, but the bigger kind of big titles, then you get an online version and everybody's playing it sort of together. I wonder if you'd also see that pattern happening here, and are we just a reflection of what the general like gaming community is also doing?
I think we'll see that in Call of Duty. Like long ago, Call of Duty had split screen. And Doom, for example, you could LAN, but then that kind of systematically got weeded out. And then Call of Duty was split screen. Then it became, I think that became LAN, and then you could go online. And now all Call of Duty games are online. But yeah, I think that could, maybe horse games were like way like ahead of its time.
Like, have you guys seen that brilliant photo of the Call of Duty at a LAN party where the guy is like duct taped to the ceiling? I think that's just a brilliant photo of like the lengths people would go to like have a LAN party. That's such a throwback. It's funny how like I don't think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think horse games ever sort of had a LAN section, just because they assumed horse people weren't actually together at the time.
We were lonely people.
Yeah, we were spread out.
Also, especially when you look at how they look on the outside, I feel like generally a lot of them like, oh, this is only for kids. No
Yeah.
teenagers or
Yeah.
adults or elderly people are gonna touch this. We don't care about that. Which is why people don't realize like it's actually big just in terms of its loudness. It's small because you don't see this talked about with someone like Jacksepticeye or like Corey X Kenshin. I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna play the latest horse game on the video. That's what you usually see like a lot of Star Stable YouTubers or just people that are heavily invested into horse or animal games touch these more than an average person that's like touching like Fortnite or like the next Call of Duty game.
It's an absolute niche genre. That's the problem, I think, with horse games. And due to that, it's the target audience and all of that kind of makes it a small niche, and that's why people just don't, spend money on them, which is really sad.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking it could actually be a kind of an insult that they didn't add any land because they all thought that horse gamers didn't have friends.
We were all just really lonely sitting in our bedrooms.
Bunch of
Only here just sitting with like our imaginary friends just drinking tea.
horse chicks don't have
quite
friends.
sad, actually.
We are a sad bunch.
Oh, all right. So to wrap that up, we're now going into the. This makes me want to say a cuss word, but I'm gonna retain my cussing. No. I'm retaining to myself. So 2016, 2019, I call this the shady Steam age, and this is where we start to see a lot of crappy horse games, but also some horse games trying to make it on consoles such as the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, etc. But most of these games are very underperformed. For example, the duo of My Little Riding Champion and Unicorn Princess. They're basically made by the same people with the same exact graphics, with both nice looking covers. Like, honestly, if you look at this, you're like, well, this is probably gonna be a good horse game. Then you go pay your $30 for it, and then you look and you're like, oh no. Because the graphics look like something from 2005 with crappy voice acting, and as well as character designs in terms of horses and riders just being disgusting. Which is not really worth $30 when you also take into account as well if you look at the mechanics of both of these, but the controls being really bad. And this is also where you start to see our first time seeing someone trying to remake a horse game, where they try to remake My Riding Stable's Life with Horses into My Riding Stable's Your Horse Breeding, and it performed really bad because it basically dumbed down really bad compared to the original, with having more kiddie-ish bright graphics, not really making good environments, as well as stripping what the original prior had, with giving it crappier controls and making it not really worth $20. We did have some average horse games that came out, such as The Birth of Horse Riding Tales and Horse Riding Deluxe 1 and 2 being okay for this period. However, this is also where we start to see SSO going into the tyranny age, where stuff starts coming out from the seams once we see the flaws of SSO in general, and people in this period specifically, I feel like, where they just basically start to become very desperate for a better horse game, to have graphics in AAA games, as well as actual challenging horse controls compared to basic WASD or basic arrow keys. So I hope y'all have never touched these games.
Oh, sorry, I have played My Riding Champion. Why? I
yeah,
don't know why I
soul.
did do that, but I did do that.
Your soul.
We've all been there.
It's okay. Desperation got over. You had the desperation.
I did.
Just don't ever do that again.
I will do my best. I cannot promise anything.
Regardless if y'all played it, seen it, saw it, and ran away from it, why do y'all think this is where we start to see companies starting to have a lack of effort when it comes to actually making a horse game, regardless if it's for an MMO or console or just normal PC?
Ooh, that's a really good question, and I kind of sort of touched on this in my topic a little bit, but I think you've got a complete market domination by the biggest horse game, which is obviously Star Stable Online, and the general expectancy, I suppose, of games. Like, they've got to have good graphics, they've got to have good controls, they've got to have maybe a storyline, they've got to have lots of horses that people can have and buy and sell and trade, and these expectations that are up here, which they should be. We should be raising our expectations as we go through the years. But I think when you have complete market domination with Star Stable just sitting on top of literally everybody, that these smaller games maybe would be a bit intimidated by the thought of having to rival someone like that who's been going, since just after, as you said, the golden era. And then, of course, you have cheap kind of cash-in games where small companies come along and be like, horses are easy and horse people are dumb, so let's just give them a silly pink game and a nice cover photo and they'll buy it. So I think, just in general, that's the kind of age where it kind of felt like the rest of the gaming companies and community had kind of just given up on us, and we were kind of left on our Jack Jones to kind of make things work.
Yeah, definitely, because I feel like they also might have felt like they can just sort of take advantage of us horse people by releasing subpar sort of quality games, because it's such a niche area. So they probably thought that, well, it's a horse game, so horse people are going to buy it anyway because it's got a pretty horse on the front cover. They may as well buy it since they haven't had a new one in a while. So they sort of had the chance to get away with it.
Kind of like what both you and Abigail said, were like, they think we don't really gotta put much into the graphics, because I feel like since they assume this is a kids thing, and this kind of also explains with some kids TV shows are like, oh, we just gotta make it look pretty on the front and kids will eat it up no matter what, when they don't realize that they're forgetting that there's an older demographic that plays horse games. And I feel like also when, in general, if you think about for people that are desperate, when you see other genres for fantasy, such as the Final Fantasy series and Kingdom Hearts getting better graphics than their old 2000 counterparts, and seeing in action games getting better with realistic graphics, motion tracking in some choice games, as well as a bunch of other genres, you start to crave that wanting of why can't our games be on that level? Why can't we have that kind of realism in terms of fantasy or just plain old realism? I feel like also basically just in terms of people wanting it to get better, I feel like maybe because they think that they're not able to make it big in terms of money outside of, oh, we'll just put it in front of kids and they'll be fine with it.
I'm going to take Riding High as an example because I think that it kind of fits into this. Riding High did not go as high, no pun intended, as it wanted to go. As it wanted to go. It didn't go that high. But what it did manage to do was show how desperate players are for a horse game of that type. And that's what saddened me about that story. It is so telling, how, like I said, desperate. You made the joke earlier that I was desperate to play My Riding Champion. I damn well was. I just wanted a horse game. Why can't I have a good horse game? And I don't know why I can't have a good horse game. But the reason is essentially that they just don't take it seriously. We're not important. And that's really tragic.
And it's also just even sad when you look at that situation, because people put in some even went over $1,000 just to have that game, when for all we know the original people behind it just took it and ran for whatever they used with it. And it's just really sad because it was also just very, once you look at it now, when the first Alicia started to shut down, you start to see how timed it was with the scammer. Oh, Alicia's shutting down, we're gonna be here, so we'll be right here for you, baby. And then when people start to invest so much time and effort, it's just when people start to realize that it's not gonna happen. I feel like also that kind of just led to people doubting that there actually be a good horse game one day as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's really interesting to, even as you mentioned, Alicia Online, to see a game literally die. That game died. The company gave up on that game, and yet it's still going.
Yeah.
If that doesn't tell you the kind of dedication that this community has, no matter the drama that goes on behind or whatever it is, basically this community took a dead game and revived it. That's still alive to this game. To this day.
And they built it up too. They took
Yeah.
They even try to bring stuff from the failed 2.0 version. Try to make stuff not for example, for I believe the advanced course, which is the other jungle one, which is I forgot the name. It started with a W. I'm sure y'all could find it if y'all played it. But that was originally just a speed horse only, and they brought that over into a magic format. And they were that dedicated to try to bring more stuff from 2.0 into a 1.0-ish fashion, but still trying to make stuff fresh, regardless of the drama that's happened with the devs and everything else.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It is crazy.
All right. With that being said, we're now into our final time period, which is from 2020 to the present, and I call this the rebuild phase or age, whichever you want to call it. And in this age, we start to kind of see a slow eruption of people starting to step up to make indie horse PC games again, or console or mobile, depending on which one, to try to get in terms of Gucci graphics that we see in games today. And of course, with some mobile games, and also people trying to have better inclusivity with genders besides girls, as well as racing trying to have a little bit more engaging content, etc. And it usually either hit or miss. We still had a few horse games strictly targeting kids, such as the recent Spirit Riding Free game and Horse Club Adventures, but still using the girly kid mechanic. Here, have this instead. And then for mobile games, I feel like the most impactful, in my opinion, were Wild Shade and Equestrian. And out of the choose for me in particular, I feel like Wild Shade was more successful compared to Equestrian, because of how, even though they do have similar but different concepts from Alicia, for a fantasy horse racing game on a mobile version, it's pretty good compared to other mobile horse games, obviously. And it was probably, in my opinion, probably in terms of mobile games, in terms of horse games, it was probably one of like the best qualities we had in a while for that environment, from having okay environments and having different mechanics. But as for Equestrian, there were some nice qualities about it, with environments being okay, as well with having a different approach to how to do show jumping and dressage. But at times, it also just felt rushed when you look at the graphics for the horses and riders sometimes. As for PC games, we start to see games like Astride introducing the age concept, Tales of Rain Ravine trying to break out of that G-rated norm of horse games and wanting to target a more older audience, besides with seeing the small bit of dialogue with Cussin, as well as trying to have a more mature theme, as previewed from their Patreon, and also trying to see people trying to better attempt at trying to replicate riding like in real life, and that horse game introducing the use of more equestrian props, and more that are in the works, striving for better graphics, environments, and mechanics that a lot of people that played horse games growing up have always wanted. So the final question for this is, why do y'all think more people that are smaller want to make a better horse game compared to existing horse MMOs like SSO, who is not doing much in terms of effort at the moment, trying but not, and as well as other bigger companies not trying to put in effort as well?
I'm gonna jump in on this one. I think the reason why we're seeing these types of games is because many of them are aged. I think many of these game developers are aged between like 20 and 30. And I think that they grew up in this era of like a dead horse gaming genre. And I think that kind of inspired them to try and make games that they can see like in the earlier years. I mean, I think that they grew up during that big boom of good horse games. And then they went through that era of terrible horse games. And then when they finally had the chance, they're like, I'm going to make a horse game. And then, because many of these people that I spoke to, I actually had a chance to speak to a couple of them, but it sounds like people who had bad experiences with these horse games and they decided to make something better. And I think that's what's going on. And I'm happy for that. If bad horse games inspire you to make better horse games, I'm all for it.
I completely 100% agree with Rattle. I just think people have, like, as you said, gotten sick of, there is a problem of like these companies that are dominating the kind of genre that we have, kind of just realizing that and just not really giving us the content that I think we deserve. And then these people come along and, they're talented, they're creative, and they basically said, well, I can do it better. And like, I hate to be horrible, but they can. I have, we look at a game like Tales of Rain Ravine. We've never seen a game do as much with the mechanics as it has done. Now, I don't think the public version is out, but for the Patreon version of that horse game, it's running on Unreal Engine 5, and I do agree that the horse mechanics and animations aren't quite there, but the surroundings and the rest of the game is just impeccable to look at. Like, I'd say if you can't run Red Dead, this is the next best thing for you. And I think, like, generally it's just people coming along and basically saying, like, well, why can't I do it? And I'm so glad that we live in a time where that's possible for people to just do, because I can't imagine in like 2002 anybody just popping up and being like, I'm gonna make a game for the 3DS, let's go guys. Like, I can imagine that was like impossible. So I'm really glad that we're able to see these games popping up.
Oh yeah.
I feel like also because, especially with now realizing how SSO runs in terms of not just the game itself but as a company, people are just generally starting to get fed up with how current horse MMOs are running. And I feel like this essentially starts to just start on a drive of hoping that these newer games that are very promising to actually hopefully be a lot better than the older counterparts. And some also I also feel like some people also just hope that these games also help to revive the drive for older horse MMOs like SSO to actually get better, instead of just settling for small slivers just because they're making a lot of money off of it over kids or just people that just want to collect a lot of horses, etc. And with that going forward, seeing people trying to put in so much effort to have a good horse game really makes my heart happy, because I guarantee you, like, if for like little 10-year-old me, I'm pretty sure she would be very happy to see something like this and then put it on her Amazon wish list like everything else.
And I think a lot of these creators have learned from like previous games, like mistakes. They see the whole potential in the market, and maybe there's also like a lot more horse people sort of making these games. And with these games, they're gonna set a sort of new standard. And even if we end up having another flop, like we see on the chart, like you're gonna have so much substance in these games, so much content and like replayability and online content that they're gonna be able to stay online forever. So I think it's just a really good market for them right now.
Oh yeah.
That actually brings up a really interesting point of like games maybe that haven't lived up to expectations. Like, who's actually making them? Are we having horse people that are in the boardrooms, that are in the graphic design teams, or are we sort of getting these people who are like, oh, we can just make a horse game, here's like a horse asset off of this like marketplace and we can just slap it into a game? Like, how many of our games that we love and consume, or even the ones that we really don't like, are actually made by people who actually care about the topic and actually care about the horses themselves?
Yeah, because like especially for like when you look at Red Dead Redemption 2, people think that's a horse game, but it's not. It's an action story game.
Yeah.
It mind blows me how like they even went to the mile of trying to get motion capture of horses, and that's why I feel like Red Dead Redemption 2, outside of the horse game genre, has, in terms of animation, the best horse riding animations possible compared to other horse PC games. And I feel like once people start side-eyeing that, they wonder if horse games like SSO really do take effort in trying to actually get better animations, because if we look at the horses of SSO, especially my least favorite horse breed, the Gen 3 Frisian, which is still not fixed yet.
That poor Frisian.
Somehow they thought a horse like that should run and act like they're on cocaine, whereas apparently the games from Red Dead Redemption 2 can run elegantly and proudly, but apparently they did not have no comprehension. I don't know if they like smoked some weed prior, or they were just drunk or something for Christmas, or God knows what happened. But yeah, I just hope in general that one day horse games that are just settling for less realize that they still need to settle for more and have a bigger drive to remember why they started their horse games in the first place, and try to improve over time to at least still be a MMO that still lasts for years and years and years, like World of Warcraft or even Wizard 101.
There is another point I just briefly want to touch on before we sign off, because when you're ready. But the thing is we discussed Star Stable. Poor Star Stable. She's getting bashed again today.
Getting demolished today, boy. Ooh, she getting demolished.
There's unfortunately a very easy punching bag.
Yes.
But shame, no, poor Star. They really are trying. We have to acknowledge this. horses. They are trying.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
trying.
they are. You know, the little that they're doing, I do feel, you know, they're taking a step in the right direction, and that's very good. But Star Stable, Rival Stars, Wild Shade, not as much. What's the other one? There was another one. The My Riding Tales. No.
Yeah.
I'm actually specifically
Riding-
talking about. Sorry, I'm actually specifically talking about games that are asking money. This is something that the microtransaction part of horse games actually got a little worrisome for me at one point, because we had My Riding Tales, we had Rival Stars, we had Star Stable, Wild Shade not as much, but then we also had, I mean, if Alicia Online was still active, it would also have been a microtransaction game. And then we have Equestrian the game. And I was actually I'm so glad to see these third-person big PC games finally starting to launch, because so many games on these mobile platforms use these predatory microtransactions, and that just drives me crazy.
Because a lot of them drive on patience to see how, because they're like,
Yeah.
well, you have this 100 weekly allowance of star coins, and if you wait just 9 weeks or 10 weeks to get yourself a Gen 3 American quarter horse, you can do that. Or you can pay for our $50 something 5k whatever amount of star coins to get more horses in just one click of a button.
I was completely preyed upon the other day, and it was my own fault. Like, I was doing it to myself. But for instance, I paid about £50 for Red Dead Redemption 2. So that's the entire game, that's a story game, that's online. You know, it's a big chunk of money, but, you know, I got a full game. And I'm not even kidding when I tell you that Equestrian the game is not out yet, and I have spent over £70 on that game, and I have almost nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
So it's just stuff like that where Red Dead Redemption is a finished game, and I hate to say, oh yes, we can compare Red Dead Redemption to Equestrian. That's not what I'm trying to do, but I'm trying to look at, you know, prices. Someone could get a fully fleshed game, and I went and spent £70 on a game that isn't even globally launched yet. That's why I completely agree with you, Rattle. Like, I hate microtransactions, because the thing with the horse game industry, just to kind of throw this in there, is I've noticed that they're not actually micro. Like, a lot of the time, I'm not talking about like £2 or £3, you know, to get a little horsey, or to go an extra race or whatever it is. It's like I have to put in £50 for me to get like one horse and like a set of tack, and
crazy.
you know, it's nuts. It genuinely is nuts, and I just feel so terrible. And it makes me really happy when I hear games like Astride saying that they're going for DLC, because yes, I mean, DLC has its own issues, but at the same time, at the end of the day, DLC is completely optional. Will I get preyed upon, and will I buy every single DLC pack? You can bet your bottom dollar that I will be doing that. But I'll feel much better about it than I do, paying £70 to get almost nothing to show for it.
That's the thing. I actually did the math. Equestrian the game is, I'm working on a review, but I was so upset when I first made my review. I actually had to calm down and redo it. Oh, no. I was not very happy with the game. But I actually did the math on that game, and it costs you $120 to get parts of the cosmetics currently available in the shop. And you have to pay $240 to get everything. And I can take $120 right now and buy Elden Ring fully. The big pack Elden Ring. I'm rather gonna do that.
Yeah,
That's why I want to calculate what happens if you're trying to, like, how many star coins does it take to try to get everything in Star Stable? Because I guarantee you would see something in the thousands, because of how much of them are trying to cap at 10k to force you to try to get ones with star coins. Because I try to milk so much out of people that play these games.
I do think that we have figured out, though, why the Phrygian is so expensive now, because we have to pay for its cocaine habit as well.
We got to support its drug use.
Sorry.
It can't go to rehab, so they have to try to get it out.
I had to get that out of my system, sorry.
Fair enough.
Sorry, Nyx, you wanted to add something?
No, I think you guys have raised all the sort of meaningful points.
Don't know if the crack cocaine comment was meaningful, but
had to be done, Abigail. Had to be done.
All right. So, closing this out, overall, horse games evolved in graphics, but not much in content, story, customization, etc., leading to people wanting a horse game with more than just the bare minimum of horse care and basic horse riding with the 3 basic English disciplines. And in general, I feel like this is where we start to see people just wanting more in terms of, with the games coming out in the rebuild phase, it just basically set hopes in people's hearts of hoping to one day that they'll actually get the game that they've always dreamed of as a kid.
That's sweet.
That was awesome. Thank you, Moon. That was really a really cool segment.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
How the hell am I gonna top that?
I don't know. big segment to follow.
Yeah, how about
I'm expecting a timeline from you that looks like Moon's.
we can pick this up again tomorrow when I have my timeline. Let's go.
Okay.
So within the gaming genre, there is a clear distinction between horse games and games that have horses, or games with horses as we know them. This distinction stretches into specifically quality, and most people will say that horse games are just not as good as games with horses. I think we can all agree on that.
Yes.
Yes.
But I'd like to take the time today to kind of look at that, why that might be. Essentially the question, why is it that games with horses are better than horse games? Now the easy answer is immediately big budget. You know, I think that's like the first thing that pops into people's heads. You know, it has a big budget. You cannot compare these two games. But I think it goes deeper than that, and there's more to it. So just to define first what I mean by a horse game and a game with horses. So horse games are games that make a game designed around horses. So they start with a horse, and then they build the game up around everything you might be able to do with a horse, with the focus on some sort of horsey activity, like show jumping or dressage or some such. So games with horses are the exact opposite. They create a game, like a Western game or a fantasy, or my favorite, an RPG. And after the game has been decided on, or even partly coded, they then add horses to a mechanic that enhances the gameplay. So horse games are where horses are the focus, and games with horses are the added boon. And yet games with horses are still better than horse games. Figure that one out. So just before I go too far, I want to ask you guys, which games with horses do you guys like the most? Abigail, I'm going to start with you, and I think I already know what your answer is going to be.
I think everybody knows my answer. Yeah, I mean, like, there is no match for this. Red Dead Redemption 2, even if you were just to say Red Dead Redemption 1, like, it just takes the cake. But I don't think I need to explain. If you've seen anything on the game, you know exactly why.
Yeah, no, it's a brilliant game, and I just think that it is the epitome of what we can get with horse games. I think literally like Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah.
Okay, Moon, which is your favorite games with horses and why? Or yeah, what do you want to add?
So besides Red Dead Redemption 2, I do like Skyrim.
Oh.
Yes, I got here's the thing. Yes, they are chunky boys that are not that good animated. And yes, they can climb anything regardless of how high it is. But I do find them very cute.
Aww.
In terms of the side that I would say in terms of an MMO, I would have to go with Black Desert Online because they managed to take a lot of function around that besides just going point A to B. You can teach them tricks or try to build up skills. You can trade them, not necessarily trade, but you can sell them in auctions. You can breed other people, and breed other people's horses, not people. And just in general, because I find it fascinating for like all three of these that are probably my favorite, because they all have a purpose, regardless of how little it can seem. Because you can probably play the game without these, but they're so very much impactful for its gameplay.
Yeah.
And that's why I like all three of these.
Cool. Nyx, what's yours?
Well, aside of the obvious Red Dead, I do enjoy games like Witcher, where I like riding around on Roach, taking him out into the countryside, having a bit of fun. Mountain Blade, all games. It's a game, it's a battle sort of orientated game, right? You're meant to go in there and you're meant to sort of, hurt people. But I usually find myself sort of riding around a little bit, like looking at my horse, riding through villages, sort of, like creating your own little like trail ride when there's literally like a battle happening behind you. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I love Mountain Blade. I think it's a very, very good game, and it also enhances more horse game mechanics in general. I actually have two games that I just want to mention, and Shadow of the Colossus, which I have played that game. I think I finished it like 3 times, and once on hard mode I had a white horse. So I love that game. There was this really cool instance in battling the second Colossus, and it's on the beach, and although aggro is not really needed for that battle, I just remember calling to her desperately over the fight, and aggro coming to stand next to me, but she's rearing and she's terrified, and she actually bolted. And that kind of enhanced the terror, because the horse was also responding to its environments, and that made it feel alive. And then Darksiders, I think, is a game a lot of people overlook as a horse game, but Darksiders, actually, your characters, I don't know, just for the record, has any of you actually played Darksiders?
No.
I've never heard of that. I know Dark Souls.
Oh, no.
I don't know no Dark Souls.
Darksiders is really cool. You play as War. You have 2 games that I would recommend. Is Darksiders 1 and 2, and then you play as War, and you get your horse, and the horse's name is Ruin. And it's so cool because the horses are used in battle, and you can summon it when you need it, and you can just use it to chop people's heads off. It's amazing. And
I realized another one I forgot to add was also Ghost of Tsushima.
Oh yeah. That's a good game. That's a good game.
Because besides with the horses just being used for point A to B, it just, especially with fitting the whole like samurai history aesthetic, and just in general, like, because they also did a brilliant job on horses on, it just looks very pretty in terms of cinematics and that sort of thing. But yeah,
exactly. It's a free roaming open world that allows you to explore a different world in history, as you stated, Moon, exploring Japan and the Kamakura period, which is brilliant. It's not just about riding the horse, it's about doing something more with it and exploring a world you will never see in real life. So that's kind of something that I think we can all kind of say, is that these games, beyond being a horse game, they offer experiences. It's not just grooming the horse, picking the hooves. There's more to it than just, taking care of the horse or training the horse. So horse games are focused on simulating horse life. Their sole objective is to recreate what it would be like to keep a horse. But unfortunately, they missed the mark, because having a horse is not about cleaning a stall or grooming it or picking its hooves. That is just part of what it means to have a horse. What it's really about is having a companion, riding it, and having horse riding experiences. That's what they miss. Nyx, I think you can actually maybe say something about that, because you actually, like you and Abigail actually both, you work with horses. Do you think that's kind of more what horse games should be about?
Yeah, no, I think you have it spot on. It's definitely that sort of like interaction with the horse, and actually that sort of, being there with them. Like, so many of these games are sort of like, oh yeah, these players are definitely going to be interested in like scraping out 4 hooves, which takes like 1 minute for every single one. Yeah. And there's like little tiny pieces you have to like scrub in, and they're gonna love that gameplay.
Don't forget trying to not.
Who designs this?
Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you don't hit the frog, or else your horse is going to get stressed and they're gonna get mad at you for the rest of the day.
That's how that works.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is I have a bit of a different experience because I volunteer, so I don't have a horse up there. I don't go for lessons. My job is I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I cycle to my local stables, and I help out for the entire day. I'm filling hay nets, I'm literally doing the stuff that is so annoying in the games. I'm picking out the hooves, I'm mucking out, I'm sweeping, whatever.
Oh no.
And I think, obviously because that's my core experience when I'm up there, that's kind of the bit where I'm like, because when I am dealing with horses, they're not mine. I don't feel, of course I do feel somewhat of a connection to them, but at the end of the day, I'm not gonna get up and I'm not gonna ride them, and I'm not gonna see them past, whatever chores that I have to do. And I think it's an interesting point to kind of have that balance of, okay, well, you need to do these chores when you have horses, but what is it really giving to your connection, as you said, to the horse? How much is that horse going to be your companion? And as you say, I hate it when games are just like, yes, you could just pick out each individual hoof, because that's not what horses are about. Yes, it's a very important part, but at the end of the day, that's not actually going to increase your companionship with that horse. It's about falling off. It's about, coming over the scary things. It's about your horse spooking and dumping you and you having to get back on it. And I think a lot of games just choose to ignore that a bit and instead, have the hoof picking and the watering and the grooming on one particular spot. I especially hate games that have the horses covered in dust and you have to get every single piece off. I hate that. Why are you doing that to me? I do not have time to do this.
I hate that.
Girl, if you go into Silver Buckle Stables or even Springdale / Ellenwood Ticker's horse, ooh god, it's a pain when you think, oh, I got all the dirt off. Then you start turning and you see that it somehow got in private, and you're like, oh great. Nice. I just spent 10 minutes cleaning it. It totally didn't add pain. It totally didn't.
No, I'm sorry. My riding stable's too life with horses. When you have 10 horses and you have to keep them all at 3 golden horseshoes, and you gotta pick all the hooves, and I want to kill all my horses.
Such a pain.
Let me hire somebody that can help.
Exactly.
Anyway, so I actually want to talk about the introductions to horses in games with horses, because this is really interesting and something I think that also kind of gets bleeded out into a lot of horse games. So in Darksiders, for example, I find my first horse, Ruin, war steed, after fighting fighting him in a huge battle, and then for a moment we have this moment where he kind of wants to kill me, but then he becomes my friend, and then I have this bond with him, and then he's my companion for the rest of the ride. So in Elden Ring, I acquire a horse when a mysterious character gives me a spirit whistle with which to summon my spirit steed Torrent, and he offers another boon in battle. And with Ghost of Tsushima, I find my horse after we've assaulted the fort, and then you find these 3 horses, and you have to pick one of those 3, and each of them you can give a name, and that is your horse for the rest of the game. And finally, I just want to mention my favorite. In Shadow of the Colossus, my horse Agro is with me from the beginning, and although I don't know where she came from, I cannot complete my journey without her. She is imperative to taking down those titans, and she is my friend. And that's something I think that is missing in horse games. Each of these horses offer wonderful experiences and bonds that we can share later, that we can actually retell. And yes, it's a bond, because a bond is not just an arbitrary bar that needs to be filled up. It is beyond that an experience we must have with the horse, and the satisfaction along with it when we manage to bond with it. That is something I think that is imperative to horse games, and that what we're missing. Because we create a horse. Let's take Starter, Star Stable Starter horse. How many of you still ride that horse?
Hell no.
Still ride it.
Which horse?
I specifically take the... See, look, this is why I have a problem with some of y'all. Y'all be just ditching that poor horse into the catching up dust. See, look, this is why I specifically take that horse out whenever I'm about to go into a new area of SSO, or if it's just strictly for the main story. Side quests, that can be any other horse if they want to. But for the main story, and basically if you're just going to a new region of SSO, I feel like that's the first horse that should go into it, besides your Gen 3 and Illusion that you bought recently for your birthday. But also I feel like the reason why it's not memorable for a lot of people is because once you start seeing Guccier horses that are more animated compared to the starter horse, they're like, we're gonna go somewhere else. Which is why it pains me to see once people, because at the end of the day, we fell in love with that horse at the beginning when we only had one horse, and then once we started seeing the addition of being able to buy more horses, we fall in love with more horses, and then those horses get rejected once we get into Gen 2, staying when we go into Gen 3. It's just basically also, I feel like the reason why for that is strictly based off of the looks and the animations, because they seem more alive compared to our starter. Yeah, our starter has been updated 3 times and looks a little more alive, but in terms of its animations and its looks, it doesn't compare to something like the Jorvik Wild Horse or the Arabian.
Yeah.
You made a really, really good point there of, it's more than just a bar to fill up. And I'd just like to say, in something like Red Dead Redemption 2, when you pat your horse, let's say you've just nicked somebody's horse, you've just yoinked it, you give it a pat, right? And it's sort of just like, okay, cool, I'm being patted. You have a level 4 bond with that horse, and it'll do this really cute, like, kind of lean into your pat and, like, stretch, like it's having a great time. And it's just something like that where it's like, I see the difference. It makes me want to hang out. I hate to say it like that, but it makes me want to hang out with this horse. I want to, get to know this horse's personality. I feel a connection. And as Moon was saying, like, the connection we sort of have with horses at the beginning, our first horse, I think a lot of games lose that when they add, hundreds of other horse options that are simply nothing more than just reskins. They're not faster, they're not spicier. I think Equestrian the game did quite a nice job of that, of making the horses quite unique. But and I'm so sorry, Star Stable, I keep going at you. But a game like Star Stable is simply sort of reskinning the same horses that we get to purchase. But I have heard that they're going to change that, so that's a really positive thing to hear.
What I love in Red Dead, for example, in single player, in the campaign, the first horse you're sort of introduced to after Arsene sort of talks about his deceased horse, is the like random little scared horse you find in a barn that you're given to, and you're you can ride this horse. And I absolutely love that horse. If I first saw that horse in the trailers, and I was like, no, this is gonna be your little generic horse. But I absolutely love that horse, because I mean, in the game you could have very easily gotten enough money, and then actually I think the game actually gives you a chance to choose like a Black Shire or something like that.
It gives you a chance to buy a Black Shire, or you can sell it and buy a Palomino Morgan.
But I actually like staying with that game with the horse, because it gives you like a little backstory, and it gives you the chance to sort of bond with this little horse that you found. It was really scared, and now you're teaching it not to spook at like snakes and all the other little things they spook at. And it sort of like develops personality, and you can almost sort of give it its own backstory and everything. And
that is actually exactly the point, because if we go at Equestrian the game, for example, the first horse that I create, I have to sell, because it's a useless horse. If I go into Rival Stars, the first horse that I make there, I have to sell. It's a useless horse. And it just keeps going at that. The first horse that you get is going to be the one that you have the biggest bond with. As you just said, Nyx, I have the exact same problem with Red Dead. I never sell that horse.
Exactly.
It's my horse. It's my pony. It's the one I have a story with, and that's kind of it. We want stories with our horses.
I love all the little stories that you hear from like people who are like, oh, I picked up this random Shire once, and it's really slow and it's got really low health, but I just love it so much. And it's just those bonding moments of like, the horse might be really bad, like it's not fast, it's not particularly good at jumping, it can't go for very long, but people like make this connection with the horse, and that's it. You can't take that horse away from that person anymore.
Yes. And that's the thing, is those emotional connections that we make with horses is something I think that is so high in these types of games. We do make these emotional connections, and I can't remember a horse game where I had those same connections. I really can't think of one. If you guys can actually tell me of one.
No, honestly, I remember horse games in general, but never like a specific horse.
No.
That's quite sad actually. Now that you brought that up,
It is sad.
I think for one, in terms of like an actual horse game that did that, I would say like the prequel of Pets Horse Club, and where over here it's called Horse, but in others called Pippa Funnel Horse Ranch Rescue. It bonds you technically to the second horse you get, which starts out from a foal.
That's true.
You sort of bond with the first horse, but not so much. I mean, you kind of do as well, since it does rescue you, sort of. But the second one, since that's the horse that you stuck with, because basically that's what Lily is going to be stuck with in terms of going to each competition area to try to get enough money to pay off that debt that Rude Van Guinness put on her uncle's ranch. And there's also instances in the story where you have those bonding instances, such as like getting sick, or like having like a little bit of a like quote unquote fight in terms of horse wise. But I feel like that horse game in particular was really like the only one that actually tried to have an actual connection with your horse, and not just oh, here's your horse you got from a fire. Yeah, you're just gonna see it every time you do show jumping and cross country and horse care, and that's it.
Yeah, but that's the thing, and I think those people understood that the first horse that you make in a game or that you get in a game, you're instantly gonna have a bond with. I still ride Queenie in Skyrim, the first horse you get.
Aww.
I still ride Queenie. or Shadowmere. Shadowmere is also cool.
I preferred Frost, but you know.
Oh, I'm sorry, Frost. I forgot about you.
I managed to kind of. That's why I was like, okay, so both of these horses are Gucci, so I'm gonna find some sort of way to keep both so that I don't lose either of them. So I just have one of them hold into a corner of a stable at like one of those like house homeland things that you can build, and then ride the other.
So I actually have a funny question for you guys, and I wonder if you're going to be able to answer me. What is the best horse simulation game currently on the market?
Oh.
Wait, what? Can you define horse simulation?
So a game that kind of defines a life with horses, you know, that kind of exemplifies a life with horses, you know, like what you consider to be the best horse simulation game. So it's like kind of life with horses, you know, that's kind of what I'm thinking. You know, you have a stable, you have to take care of them. So that kind of simulates a life with horses. What is the best game currently that does that?
I haven't played this game in ages, and it might actually be a very bad game because I haven't played it in so long. I'm gonna go, and again, this isn't a recent game because I can't quite think of a game that actually fits that category correctly. I'm gonna go with My Horse and Me Too.
Okay, yeah.
Now,
The
reason I say that as well is because now I had a funny little setup for that game. I had a rocking horse when I was younger, and my parents thought it was hilarious for me to play My Horse and Me Too on the Wii, and the Wii had like a little strap that would go between the two controllers, and so I could put the strap between the horse's mouth and have it like reins. And so it made my experience so much more fun to play the game. So I'll go with My Horse and Me Too.
I need to play a horse game like that. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I need to. But yeah, anyway, Moon, which one do you think?
If I had to base solely off of simulation, I would say the very last Let's Ride Friends Forever one, because it has you start out with a foal, and then as you progressively care for it until it gets to an adult, so you could do jumping besides the showing in the arena and stuff. I feel like, I feel like generally that's the closest, because you have to actually go out and buy stuff for your horse and not buy it from some shopping thing. You have to actually take care of it, make sure it's not injured, make sure it's actually like happy, like actually fulfill its needs, compared to other games where like, oh, just do your horse care and you're done for the day. I feel like, because like it's really hard to think of like a current recent one, because there's not really one that's actually like showing that you have to put in hard work for your horse.
Yeah.
More of the horse games today is just, oh, get a horse and then spend money on it, and then just put in an outfit and do this. Like Star Stable. We're really beating up Star Stable today.
Poor Star
Stable.
We gotta ease up on them.
Yeah. Because like back then, it used to have like a mechanic where you did horse care periodically, and then once they took that out, we're like, oh, you're just gonna do it once a day. That kind of just defeated the purpose of trying to put in work to make sure your horse is taken care of.
Yeah.
And I wish horse games still had that. Make sure you actually take care of your horse, but not in a way where it's just dreadful and actually punishes you or makes you feel like a horrible human being over and over.
I actually have never played that game. I'll have to check it out. Nyx, you?
For me personally, probably Imagine Champion Rider, because it was the first game where like working with the horse and like doing all the, as you said, you know, the hoof and the like sponging the horse and then spraying it down. It didn't feel like a chore. Yeah. It kind of just felt like enjoyable, and like I was actually helping the horse and having some fun. So I mean, it was a bit more cartoony, but I'd still go with Imagine Champion Rider.
So I'm going to be very dramatic now and say that you're all wrong.
What? What are you gonna say then?
The best horse simulation. The best horse simulator game isn't even a horse game. It's The Sims 3.
Oh no.
Oh my god!
You are so right.
I feel silly now.
I'm stupid. I just.
Yes, it worked.
Yeah. Right. Because otherwise they're gonna die by themselves. I'm stupid.
No, you're right.
But you have to I forgot about
I didn't
that.
see that coming at all.
But it is extremely ironic that a game that isn't even a horse game is technically the best horse simulation game, and all of these horse games are trying to be horse simulation games. But it's just kind of very sad when you think about it. You know that the best horse simulation game is a freaking game that isn't even about horses. But I've played The Sims 3, and that game is brilliant. You can you can have like a huge stable. You can customize your stable. You can breed horses. You can train them. You can design your jumps. You can race them. You actually have a whole thing where your character slowly learns how to ride, and you build a bond with your horse. Sims also combines the aspect of life and combines it with horses. So you can be pregnant and ride a pony. You can be sick and ride a horse. You can be broke and ride your horse, which is actually very realistic. I think a lot of companies need to look at Sims and how they really approach horses in general. They made the horses are kind of a part of life, but not only that, they looked at all aspects that made up a horse's life. They also looked at it also through the horse's eyes, and that is kind of what these horse simulations should be, I think. It's a game that embraces all aspects of the game and does not try and smother us with mini games. But I do actually want to say something else. So we've kind of discussed, all of the good things about these big games with horses. But something I think that we also need to be absolutely fair about is not all of these horse games actually have better horse game mechanics. So things things that comes to mind is actually Last of Us and Elder Scrolls series, because I'm sorry, but in those games it's technically just transport. Which is fine.
That's true.
Which is fine. It's just you kind of get on the horse and you ride from point A to point B, and that's actually fine. So these horses are really just there to make the journey shorter. But I still want to say something about it, because it's still something that companies kind of scramble to get into their game. And you'll see this almost always in RPGs. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but like almost all RPGs try to have a horse in there.
Yeah. Actually, now that you mention it, it's true, because they're transport, aren't they?
Yes. The reason for that is actually quite simple. RPGs started... Okay, I'm not going to give a huge history lesson, but it's just very interesting. So, it started in 1974 with Dungeons and Dragons, which was made by Gygax. Before I continue, for those of you who don't know, Dungeons and Dragons is what we call a tabletop role-playing game. So you sit around a table, one person is the dungeon master or the controller of the story, the others are the players, and we as the players interact with the world through the dungeon master, and the dungeon master guides us through the story. We roll dice, we have battles, but it's essentially it is your actions and character that kind of determines how the story will unfold. It's really a lot of fun. For those of you who have never played this game, please do. It's really great. The thing with Dungeons & Dragons is the coolest thing. The reason why Dungeons & Dragons was so popular is because of one simple rule. You could do anything you want. So you could walk into a tavern and beat a barman and then try and escape the cops, or you could walk into the bar and you can try and rob someone, or you can literally do anything. That's the beauty of Dungeons and Dragons. And ever since Dungeons and Dragons, I feel like games have been trying to kind of encapsulate everything that a role-playing game can do, which is why I get so angry when people say it's a role-playing game. I'm like, no, that is not a role-playing game.
Yeah.
But the point that I'm making is they're adding horses for one reason only. The horses don't have to have mounted combat. They don't have to actually do much. It's solely for immersion. And it still offers immersion, which is actually pretty interesting when you think about just how much effort they go through just to add those horses.
That's what I was going to say, because when you think about, like, when you said, like, they just have, like, RPGs just have to throw in a horse in there. If you think about, like, someone like the fantasy ones, or, like Red Dead Redemption 2, or action-based ones. It's kind of like with movies where, like, they add that picture of, like, you trying to, like, traverse in that universe that you're introduced to. It's similar to, like, with, like, TV shows and movies that are, like, based on medieval times or Western times, and just put a horse in there to bring the image all together.
Yes, exactly. It is immersing you into that world by adding elements that you have seen in other fantasy genres. Exactly that. So I kind of have it like here. It's a feeling and emotion you get when you mount your horse and pick the road to the newest town the first time. Now, I once said that you can forget how a game plays or how the story tells, but what it makes you feel, that will stick with you forever. And mounting a horse to go on an adventure, that's something that will stick with you, especially the first time you do it. The question that I essentially asking is, there's the main thing that I kind of want to get to is, why are games with horses better than horse games? So there's actually two reasons for this. The first reason is Easy reason, budget. Like I said earlier, budget.
Yeah.
It's these games have huge budgets, and if we're gonna compare Stride's budget to Red Dead Redemption's budget, yeah, it's silly to compare. And because of that, they have more manpower. They have more, they can do motion capture. They can do all of these great things to bring the horse games to life. But a big budget does not equal a good game. But there's a reason why the budgets are so big, and that's the other reason, which actually frustrates me to no point. It's the target audience. They decide that a horse game, like we actually discussed this earlier, but a horse game goes for kids or for girls. So the first thing that they do is, like you said earlier, Moon, they slap on pretty horses on there, and I'm going to do it like this. So I'm a game creator, okay? And I go to Rocksteady and I tell them, hey, I want to make a horse game. The first thing Rocksteady is going to ask me, who is the game for? And if I tell them, hey, this game is meant for little girls and boys, maybe some young kids that it is for, then Rocksteady is going to tell me, okay, I'm going to give you a budget of $100 and whatever I might have in my pocket, that's your budget. They're not going to waste their money on something that they don't think they're going to get money back on. And that's the fault of horse games. They need to expand the target audience into something wider to ensure that they can get bigger budgets in order to make bigger horse games.
Because it reminds me of kind of like with like outside of horse games like Saddle Club, like when they brought it to like TV show, they basically made it girly, but it just basically felt like it was like more of like kind of high school preppy-ish, like something like a kid would fall right into. And I feel like that links perfectly with horse games, because people think, oh, they're gonna really just care about like some high school-esque drama and some little issue with people, and like, oh, here's the stereotypical rude girl that abuses her horses, or here's the stereotypical owner that abuses her horses, and you're the horse girl that comes in and saves the day. They don't really go beyond that in terms of like having an actual plot with trying to like per se trying to get certain stuff or trying to save certain stuff or something horse related, but take it outside of they don't really think outside of the box.
Yes.
And it also shows when you look at how when they design horses, some other horse games, especially if you look at the older ones, they don't really go outside of the box. They're either the same model with different colors or different models, but not much in the color regions. And it really shows because some just really don't try to diversify of what you can do in a horse game universe besides, oh, you gotta be a championship and watch out for these rude people that are trying to bring you down, or oh, you gotta stop this abusive company trying to hurt the environment. You need to stop them. They never do. They never do anything in terms of trying to solve an actual mystery that's not related to horses, or they never do anything that's actually based off of the plot in terms of some sort of discovery or in terms of something with the environment. It's always strictly something that has to do with a peppy high school problem that you're going to remember when you're older, or some stereotypical environment issue.
I mean, that kind of segment sort of goes into what I'm going to be talking about in a second, but
I'm sorry.
No, it's perfect. It flows beautifully. But yeah, no, you're completely right. In sort of the audience that we're looking at, I just think, even looking at the covers that Moon has on the beautiful chart, there are only, like, I hate to label it this way, but there's only sort of like, the skinny white girls on the photos, and we never see the diversity. There's a couple I can see that I think have men on them. I think actually there's one, I think it's Equestrian Showcase at the very beginning in Ostwind. But yeah, we never sort of see anything that even, marketing wise is saying, hey, we're for everyone, or hey, we're going to be groundbreaking with this game. It's all sort of the same, like, cutesy wootsy, girls come play. We have a shiny, pretty pony for you, sort of thing.
I feel like games or like big sort of like producers or games with a high budget have the sort of ability to make a horse look and feel like a horse. Like, you can see it breathing, you can see it looking around and interacting with the world, whereas smaller budget games have to sort of fill that hole by making us do horsey things. So obviously like taking care of the horse, picking out its hooves, and that sort of picks up the slack that's created by like lower graphics or low budget models, which, you know, like if you look at Red Dead Redemption, you can see like there's a gunshot in the distance. The horse will look up at it and it'll move its ears towards it. Whereas if you're playing a horse game, most of these horses just look straight ahead constantly. They're never scared of anything. They don't look at anything. They won't even react to your pets. Like if you're petting them. There's just nothing going on. So these games sort of have to pick up that slack by making us do horsey things to make it feel like an actual horse game. Whereas like an actual like game with horses does that by making the horses more realistic. But obviously that's sort of a budget issue most of the time.
Yeah, but that's brilliantly said. The thing is that I also want to just add here is games with horses pulls in girls, essentially. You know, if there's a pretty horse on the cover, for example, Elden Ring. So I'm going to use a couple of examples just real quick. Darksiders, for example, is a hack and slash. So if someone picks up Darksiders for the horse, they're going to get into hack and slashing. If you know, Skyrim is an open world RPG, if someone picks up that game for the horses, they're going to get into, you know, RPGing. If they pick up Two Worlds, which is actually a game that is like completely like in the obscurity. I don't know why. It actually has horses and it has horse combat and it's a really cool game. But Two Worlds 2 is really good. And if someone picks that game up, they're going to get into RPGing and like really tough battles. And even Mountain Blade, Nyx. I mean, think about it. If someone picks up Mountain Blade, they're going to, you know, get into strategic battles and they're going to get into interesting things. So the thing is, passion can expand our horizons. And it's kind of this, I came for the horse, I stayed for the game. But that's something I think that the fact that you, as Abigail Pinehaven, someone who plays Red Dead Redemption, you know, and that's clearly, technically, you're not the market audience, but we play it because we want to have the damn horses. And if companies can just kind of, you know, tear out this stupid thing over their eyes and just understand that we're willing to slog through a lot to get to a horse, they would actually realize that there's a huge market there. But I think I'm touching again on what you're going to be discussing. So I'm going to close this thing off. So what we want in horse games is the reason why we all really want horses in the end. The companion, that building of trust, and the adventure that kind of goes along with it. It's an experience. But in these companies' mad dash to essentially give us a quote-unquote real horse experience, and by adding all of these elements that they can possibly add to create a horse life simulation, all they really manage to give us is a chore. They should focus on gameplay, intimate interactions, and a few elements that work in tandem to create a living, breathing world. I should not be forced to use my imagination in order to fill up the parts that they couldn't add, and I shouldn't be forced to kind of try and force myself into the game just because they couldn't be bothered to add atmosphere and immersion. As it's not about what we do with the horse, it's not about where we are with the horse, it is always about what we feel about those horses that really matters and that leaves us with an experience that we will remember. That's my segment.
That was a really good segment.
Yay.
Yes.
Lovely.
Really insightful.
Thank you.
It was still good.
I didn't have a chart, but at least it was okay.
It was good. Well done.
I did it without a chart. Someone give me a cookie.
Yay. So I'll be discussing the horse game community. Now, what on earth am I talking about? So the summary of basically what I'll be talking about is who exactly is the horse game community? What is it comprised of? And I think my overall kind of poignant question that I have for the end is, will the wider gaming community ever recognize us as more than just crazy horse girls? We had some really nice points in both Moon's and Rattle's section, especially in Rattle's, talking about the way that companies tend to sort of have a very specific demographic in mind with no sort of alterations to that. So when I first picked this topic, the first thing I did was Google what is a horse girl. Now I have a question for all of you, and if anybody else would like to answer this in the comments as well. Have you ever gotten called a horse girl? And if so, what was the context?
Ooh, I was called a horse girl on high school, and that it was never a good thing. They teased me for loving horses, but it was my own fault because I did like presentations on horses, and I drew horses, and I once cried because I loved horses so much because it's just I was very odd in high school, so yeah, I got teased for being a horse girl, but I carried it with pride because I was happy that I loved horses, so that was fine.
I think it was because since as basically throughout from elementary school and high school, I thought I would get made fun of for liking video games in general. The only time I mentioned playing horse games was during this partner exercise in 3rd grade, but I didn't really talk about much. I didn't get made fun of thingly, but it was like a dude's videos. This kind of just more weird out. But I didn't really talk about video games because I thought I would get called a nerd. And then once I started going to college in 2020, basically I was like, okay, I have to be more open about saying that I like playing video games, and especially with my friends. So once I started being more honest about it, I actually now feel like I regret not talking about that I like video games, because finding out there's other people from my high school that liked it, I wish that I was a little bit more open about it and not feel feel scared of being bullied. Because I think it was also because of being bullied in middle school and high school from stuff while I was in basketball, since that's where it mainly tried a lot, as well as from other sports that I've been in, because I did sports throughout middle school and high school. I was just basically scared of just being not accepted, basically.
Nyx, now I know this is a gendered question, but were you ever kind of teased for being, a horse girl in quotations, or a horse guy, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely carried the sort of stereotypes that come with it. Obviously people didn't refer to me as a horse girl, but I was definitely considered the sort of weird horse person who was I don't know, doodling horses and talking about horses, and yeah, definitely that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I was, of course I'm the same, and I googled what horse girl meant. Right? I googled the definition, and this is the very first definition that comes up. It's the one that Google shows you without having to click on anything. I'll read it for you. Horse girl. A horse girl is someone whose entire personality revolves around horses. She's usually a pre-teen or teenager. She usually has braces and is indifferent to fashion trends and completely unaware of how uncool she is. Now, the source of that was fangirlish.com. So if we kind of look at the keywords here, we're looking at preteen/teen, uncool, and that horses are sort of our entire personality. So I think a lot of people who have ever been called a horse girl or grew up being the horse girl, generally it's a pretty easy stereotype for people to sort of, some people do it playfully, some people kind of pick on you for it. But generally, sort of the word horse girl is also sort of paired with crazy. I don't believe horse girl is something that you ever really sort of grow out of, especially I found, at least, even talking to adults, to explaining either the line of work that I'm in or how much I just generally love horses, because you'd be surprised how often that comes up in conversation. But they still use the word horse girl, and I'm 21 now, so you still get that. So why is it that horses are labeled for children? Why is it that the word horse girl is pretty much only referring to teens and preteens, but we still sort of see it being used in adults? Now, I'm a nerd, and I'm so glad I get to be nerdy here, because I have statistics for you. Yes, we have analytics. So I'm happy to share analytics from my channel. I'd just like to preface, if you don't know me, I am labeling myself, at least, as a horse game channel, despite my name being from Star Stable. I used to do Star Stable content. I've kind of come away from that to do more Red Dead, Rival Stars, general horse game. So these analytics, I'd like to think, are broader than just, the Star Stable community as a whole. So looking at my own analytics, I have deducted that only 9% of my audience are 13 to 17 years old. So that already the stereotypical horse girl only fits 9% of my audience. So that is an incredibly small number, with 35% of them being 18 to 24. So I think most people within this call, I assume, are within 18 to 24. Or if you're not, then you're in the whopping 32% of people that are over 24 upwards, up to about, I think it was about 45 for that statistics, and it gets a lot lower for the older that you get. Now I know this is Nyx's realm because he's going to talk about this in a second, but I also know that 32% of my audience are male. So already we have a huge portion of at least literally just one random YouTuber from the middle of YouTube whose statistics don't even fit what I'd say companies are labeling us, the horse game community. So who is the horse game community in terms of like, how do you identify yourself as a horse game community? Would you guys say, yes, I'm in the horse game community, or would you say just I'm a horse game creator? What would you guys label yourself as?
I think I'm definitely, I'm in the horse game community, but I kind of have tentacles and everything, but I do kind of keep a solid foot in horse games because I love horse games overall. You know, I love like I said, the adventure and stuff that you go on with them. So that's kind of where, I'd say yes. I'd say yes.
I'd say yes as well. Because I feel like even though I'm a melting pot when it comes to like genres in video games, I feel like horse games have always been my core since that was like the main genre that I've played growing up. And I still hold it to my heart because I love playing them, and like as Rattle said. And even though I play games like Genshin Impact and Skyrim and Black Desert Online, I still recall back to playing older horse games because I just have so much fun playing them as a kid, and it's always brought me joy in my life. But yeah,
so already, you guys identify as, in the horse game community, whether, it's purely what you're into or it, you have association outside as well. So taking off of this, many companies and even people, as in people outside of the horse game community, assume that we are just young girls. And obviously Nyx can prove that we're not, and most people here aren't children. So we can say that that's clearly not true. So why is it that everybody's assuming that we're just children? And a big point that Rattle brought up earlier that kind of plays in mirrorly, I suppose, here is that while games are marketed towards the younger children, or young girls, I should say, all of their promotion looks exactly like that as well. So, Star Stable, it's pink, it's flashy. I wouldn't say our characters look super young, but they certainly don't look like adults, in my opinion, at least. Harking back to the wonderful timeline that Moon did, looking on a lot of the covers, they're, as I said before, they're, the skinny white girls, and they tend to look quite young as well. So if anybody who wasn't in our community was to stumble on these games, they would immediately assume that these games are not for them because they're not on the cover. These games look like, it'd almost be embarrassing if you were to walk into assuming that you had a DVD store and come out walking with, one of these covers in your hand. If you were, male or older than the age of 15. And it's really sad because I think it's isolating. So we can deduct from this that the horse game community is more than just like preteen girls. So what exactly, why are we all here? Why are we in the horse game community? I have an answer for this, but I very much like to hear you guys' answers. So why exactly are you here sitting at your PCs or laptops, playing, talking about, creating content on horse games rather than real life horses or any other game?
For me, it's a very personal thing. For me, horse games encapsulate something that I wanted to do as a kid is ride horses, is escape into worlds that I could enjoy. That's why when I spoke about my segment, I was so adamant about adventures and experiences, because When I play a horse game, it is a chance for me to experience something that I cannot afford. So I cannot go out and buy a horse right now because I just simply do not have the money. So for me, horse games are something very personal. It is a fantasy, it is an escape, it is something that I hold very dear to my heart. And I don't think horse games, just to kind of expand on that point, but I don't think horse games should be limited to kids. It shouldn't be, because Amelia Cloudwatcher is not a kid, and she plays horse games. You know, she's a good friend of mine. She was in the previous podcast, but she plays horse games and she loves them because, you know, it's that same thing. And she's an adult. I'm an adult, and we play horse games. And I wish I could expand horse games into a wider audience. It's partly the reason why I chat about it.
For me, I feel like it just derived from my initial drive of, especially with speaking up about Star Stable's issues, and then also standing up for, I know like Nyx is probably gonna talk about more about like issues with like male representation in horse games. I basically, because it felt like just mainly from me just being tired of just sitting by and watching either people that aren't girls wanting to have male characters in the game, or just from people who are wanting the game to get better and then just getting talked down to like it's nothing. It just makes me feel like no one's really trying to actually stand up for them.
Yeah.
And for me, because like in general, in my life, there wasn't really someone that actually like stood by me like when I needed it. And I want to be that person to be able to help people just in general know that, hey, I'm in the same struggle as you. And in general, I feel like, since kind of similar as well with Rattle, with not being able to afford a horse and not having the chance to actually learn how to ride one and wanting to do that when I get older, I want to at least be here to say like, hey, I'm here for y'all as well. And I feel like people that, like in general for like this community, their voice needs to be heard. And I want to do everything I can to have my voice be loud enough, regardless of what people say or tell me, oh, you're just getting fed up or nothing, or you're just ungrateful, or you complain a bunch. I'm going to speak up no matter how much people want to tear me down. Because I know that exact feeling of what it's like to get teared down and feel like you don't have any breathing room anymore.
Well said.
That's a really powerful reason. Good for you, Moon. Nyx, why exactly are you a strange adult male? Can't believe that, in the horse game community.
He's a cryptid. He's a cryptid.
Yeah. Something's
take a picture.
wrong here.
Someone take a picture.
Yeah. Paparazzi, he's over here. Come look.
He's a widely acquired specimen, very rare.
Rare Pokemon, capture.
It's sort of the same sort of reasons. I mean, when I was younger, I didn't have the chance to ride a horse because, obviously it's so expensive. So I hopped into some games, I looked around, and then when I finally did, when I was able to ride, I thought at that point I would stop, having the need to play horse games because I was riding. But I still had quite a big interest in them, and I still sort of played them. Sort of during COVID, I stopped being able to ride again. And obviously I'm trying to become a riding instructor and everything at the moment as well. And that sort of halted. So I went back to horse games again. And I think it, like Rattle and Moon said, it's a perfect way to just, you can open your PC or your Xbox or whatever. You can hop on, for example, Red Dead, go on a trail ride, have that sort of feeling, even if it's like, it's not exactly the same as like the rush you get from riding a real horse, but it's there. And I think it's great that people are able to provide that feeling for like a lower price, obviously, and like they're sort of able to simulate it almost. They're able to give you a simulation of what it's like, and let you sort of live out your passion in a different way.
Yeah, completely. And I'd love to hear in the comments as well why exactly other people are in the horse game community. So I did a poll this Wednesday. It had 7.5 thousand votes on it. You can have it up on screen now. Only 42% of those people who voted on this poll regularly ride horses in real life. And I was asking in the comments, why either you do ride horses or you don't. And a very popular or very frequent point that came up, as you guys have mentioned again, is that it's very, very expensive. According to the Evening Standard, horses can cost around £400 a month to keep. That's excluding purchase price, lessons, equipment, and the oh so terrifying vet fees. Of course, it will cost you slightly less if you're not owning a horse, but again, lessons can be £35 if you're wanting one lesson a week. That's going to be a lot per month, and plus anything equipment that you may need or places that you need to go. It gets very pricey. So let's take, for instance, just say children, for instance, they don't have a job, they're relying on their parents. If you are a parent, you're looking at 200 or up to £400 a month to give your child exactly what they want to do, the hobby that they want to have. Or you're looking at about £60 on, say, a membership, for example, Star Stable Online, in-game currency, once in a while, a £35 voucher for Christmas or some extra star coins at a birthday. That sounds far more affordable than the real life alternative of having to have real horses. Not to mention, horse riding is really dangerous, and I feel like that's something that's not talked about enough. As a parent, if your kid comes to you and they're like, I really want to ride horses, and you just look at a horse, it's this huge animal with a mind of its own. I've seen horses spook at literal bags, on the floor. They are dangerous animals. And as horse lovers, I think we know that more than anything. So of course, when you're looking at, at the end of the day, they're not going to physically hurt themselves playing Star Stable Online. So it's a much better opportunity to give your child, the thing that's going to make them happy. But then you have the flip side, right? What about the adults? People who have jobs. Maybe they have their own kids, but at the end of the day, they still love horses. As a working adult, I can confirm that we are very, very tired people. We are so tired.
20-year-old self.
Yeah, if you're in school, you're in college, you're in university, you're working, we're very tired people, and we don't have a lot of time. And some of us still may not financially be able to afford the regular lessons that we want to go for. So doesn't it sound wonderful to come home from university or work and just sit at your PC and open up this wonderful game that you can spend your hard-earned cash on, and you could just play for hours, and then, it doesn't drain you anymore. Maybe it revitalizes you a little bit. It's a far better option than what we're looking at. I hate it when people say, and I've seen it, said to people who in the horse game community of just ride a real horse, just go outside and ride a horse. And it's some people, horses are a privilege. Horses are something that if you get to be around, if you get to own, if you get to ride, you are incredibly privileged. And that's not to be horrible, but that is the truth, and a lot of us aren't as privileged to get that. And so horse games are a way, no matter how bad that they could be, there's still a way for us to connect with the things that we love most. So why is it that, there is this whole section, a huge, maybe even bigger section of the horse game community of adults, of working people in university, males who are just not represented? Well, I can't speak for the male side of things because Nyx will do that. But I do believe that it actually harks back to the beginning of my section when I'm talking about the stigma of horse girls. In school, you have the quote-unquote crazy horse girl. She reads all the horses. If she's Rattle, she makes presentations. She cries about horses, maybe even. And it's the whole, it's her personality, as the stigma says. But what happens when these horse girls grow up? And let's say you've got the handful that actually go on to ride horses because they're lucky enough to do that. But what about the horse girls that grow up and get normal jobs, or grow up and they move into cities and can't be around horses? What exactly happens to them? Do they stop liking horses? The answer is simply no. That is not what happens at all. For those, let's say the young girls before gaming, and maybe even before the internet, they grow up and they're unable to ride horses. And, they can't have their whole life revolve around it because horse riding is expensive, So you end up coming out sort of into the public and these horse girls seem to have grown out of their phase because they're not around horses anymore. Maybe they're not even talking about horses that much. So it looks like that they don't like these horses anymore. But in reality, they've grown up and they've just lacked the sort of the stimulation. You know, sure, they can read books, but you know, maybe they don't have a horsey friend to talk about the books to. You know, maybe at the time they don't have the games. So what has happened is, with the birth of the internet and with the birth of these online games, we have discovered each other. We have discovered that we are not alone, although you may be the only horse girl in your school, maybe even in your whole town. There are more of us. Isn't that incredible? There are more people who love horses so obsessively as we do.
I'm thinking of I'm thinking of that earlier comment we made where all these people thought that horse girls don't have friends. They don't need online connection.
Exactly.
Like, yes.
Exactly. Yeah. We have friends, but they're all like all over the world, you know, and we don't get to meet each other unless it's through this wonderful thing called the internet. And I think that's something that companies have yet to realize, is that my statistics show it. Statistics on Red Dead show it. I'll discuss some in a second. But there is a far greater community than I think many have even stopped to realize. So if we actually look at the community, if you take, say, Star Stable's statistic, we've got about 500,000 monthly users. That's 500,000 monthly. That's nuts. So can I just get a show of like hands who actually plays Star Stable here, like regularly?
Not anymore, but I used to.
Yeah, me too. I used to, but I've kind of dipped in that.
The sad thing is, the only time I log on if there is an actual quest or if I just need to record something. Because if you're going to talk to me to like in like 2011 to 2017, I'd be like, yeah, I get on almost every day.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that was when like SSO was when the most active it's been. But over the years, it's just been progressively less and less active because it's just been like either the same repetitive formula or it's just lacking in substance like it used to. Because we came for not just horses, but a story, gameplay, and that sort of thing. And the bar has been raised from the minute we saw our horse become a Pegasus in saving Justin's quest, the minute we go and save on. The bar has been extremely set high in terms of a quest. And the quests that we have gotten have just been, oh, we're gonna have you just run around for a good 30 minutes picking up stuff, and then do some dialogue options, and then get abruptly cut off once you're done finishing the rest of the day, and then you go back and hibernate until you finally get a quest. If you look at the community, I feel like some people just take anything at that point when it comes to SSO to say, look, they're doing something, but the content is so dry. It's like it's like an oasis that used to have like a beautiful lake, but because no one was taking care of it, it just dried up over time.
That's kind of the tragedy of it, because a lot of people will say, you know, Star Stable is outdated because it's an old game. Sorry, I just want to actually mention this because this is something I think that we missed earlier when I was discussing this, but Star Stable is an old game. It's 10 years old. That is 100% fair.
Yeah.
World of Warcraft is older. I'm sorry, but World of Warcraft is older, and it
World
still
of Warcraft
keeps...
has survived.
Yes,
so much.
because
And
do you know why it survived? Because it kept evolving, and Star Stable doesn't. Sorry, that's just something I wanted to mention, but that's partly the reason why people are disconnecting from the game, because other games are taking it by. They're rushing by Star Stable, and this game cannot keep up anymore because they did not overhaul the engine when they should have. But that's a completely different topic. Sorry, go ahead, Abigail.
No, that's really helpful, because if we look at the statistic, right, that they gave us 500,000 monthly users, and, you know, we see people, you know, let's just say like the adults who are feeling underrepresented. That's 500,000 children, right? And according to my statistics, those are actually a smaller number of the actual community out there, right? So there's an even insurmountably huge audience that there is nobody providing for at the minute, right? So for example, sort of going more into the older realm, of course, we have the Red Dead trail riding servers, right? I might be a bit flaky on this number, but about 10,000 Discord members spread out between different platforms and different servers as well. So that's 10,000 people on Red Dead Redemption playing horsey, basically.
Yeah.
Astride had over 1,000 financial backers. That is a huge number. 1,000 financial backers. This game literally doesn't exist, and it had 1,000 people step up and say, yes, I will give you money. I was one of them, by the way, and I do not regret it. Heck yes, and Russell was as well. So YouTube estimates, again, this one's a bit more rough because I'm kind of going off Social Blade, but about 500,000 views weekly on YouTube for horse game related videos, right? That is a huge number, right? This is the thing, is games, content, and posts are usually only pushed towards a very specific audience, and the content that we receive is usually incredibly limited due to a lack of supply. Moon's lovely timeline here kind of shows it, that, you know, coming to the present day, there aren't actually that many options that are still up to date, but there's a huge audience. So what's happening there? Why aren't we getting these big budget AAA games being made for us? You know, of course we say stuff like Red Dead Redemption 2 is not a horse game, and then we have that Rockstar have made, I hate to boil it down to this, but it is a car game. GTA is a car game, okay? And very frequently, car guys and horse girls are comparable, right?
Oh yeah.
Because you know, of course these are gender stereotypes, and I'm not saying at all that I'm backing this, but you can actually compare them in terms of, you know, our incredible love, the fact that we will throw money at the thing we love, to the point of almost bankruptcy.
Yeah.
But the difference is the sort of car guy market is supplied for. You know, there are lots of mobile car racing games, there's lots of AAA car racing games, but there is nothing for horses, right?
I'm actually thinking the one question that kind of pops up the whole time, if I may, is why are there preteens and teenagers kind of the demographic? And if I can actually make an assumption, I think that preteens and teenagers are more likely to have horses, and they're more likely to embrace that element of horses. Someone once said that teenagers rule the world. But the reason why they say that is because teenagers get allowances, and teenagers aren't you know, they don't have to work yet. They have a lot of free time. So a lot of mobile apps, a lot of you know, films and stuff are focused around teenage girls. So when we consider that, and we think of, you know, well, teenagers in general. So when we think of that and we think, okay, you have to make a game for a demographic, let's focus it on prepubescent girls and teenagers, because their passion is still very high, and we can exploit that passion. So that might be partly the reason why horse games in general kind of jump on this.
To also add to the when you were mentioning the demographic, because when we were talking about like the age of like SSO, since like it's now 10 years old, it reminds me of Wizard 101, which is an MMO that's like, I believe, like 15 plus years. The difference between those two is that one is ignorant to their demographic of the older side, whereas the other is not so ignorant. Because Wizard 101, they are very aware that there's still older people playing for the PvP part of the game, and people still playing for the story because they grew up with it. They are at least more aware, and they still try to market in that way to not just kids, but also their older demographic, and they're still to somewhat deliver. Obviously, it has those issues as well, but they delivered better than Star Stable. Which also begs me to question, when it comes to the horse games, I just feel like horse games that are in like the market that you can buy, they are very ignorant to what people actually play the game in terms of what they think they are actually targeting to. Because they think like, oh, there's going to be a bunch of girls. And it's similar to like My Little Pony, where people thought, oh, a lot of people are going to watch My Little Pony Friendship is Magic that are girls. And then once they realize that there's this huge community of like older people that are mostly men, and some girls that are in that community that are watching this show because of how the story writing is, how it can relate to even adult life, they realize, hey, there's actually people that are actually outside our target audience. Let's also try to make aware that there's people outside of little girls watching this show. And they are still able to deliver to not only have a good show for girls, but also a good show for people that want to at least have something that's kind of still childlike nostalgic, but still somewhat relate to struggles that they've had in their real life, or just relate to people that they can relate to.
Yeah, but Moon, sorry, just want to say that's actually very true that you're saying they're not considering why we play horse games. They just don't consider it. It's that's the biggest problem.
That is really good. And just to bounce off what Rattle said before of like prepubescent and teenage girls having more passion, I wanted to ask you guys, did you feel, as you got older, sort of from the preteen stage onwards, did you feel your passion for horses at all begin to dwindle as sort of real life set in?
Nope.
For me, it
Nope.
became difficult. It's a bunch of reasons, but it kind of the connection that I have with horses today is more bittersweet. I love horses. I can't be around them anymore. So whenever I think of horses, I still love horses, and that's why I play horse games, because that's the way I can still, capture that passion, and why I play dragon games. But getting a dragon is way more difficult than getting a horse. Trust me. But the point is that I play horse games because the passion is still there. It's just become a little bittersweet these days because I really just can't afford them, and it just makes me sad.
For me, since the reason why I never really had that passion die out was because since I still have that dream of once I'm older and actually get enough money to actually buy my own horse ranch for myself, it's I still have that dream that I want to hang on to as one of my bucket list goals. And I think the reason why is because since horses are my favorite animal, and they still are to this day, I think it's because since I never really had it die down. And I think because since I never really been fully made fun of, because even though I never mentioned it when I was in high school or middle school, I just never had it die out for myself. But yeah.
I just had a moment when I had moved countries and I had started a new job. I couldn't afford it. I hadn't been on a horse for a year, and I got so preoccupied that horses sort of went to the back of my brain. I wasn't really thinking about that. I was thinking about my job and all of that. And then the second I went back and I reconnected with horses, then it sort of reignited for me. But I did have that sort of moment where it died for a second, and then I was like, oh, never mind.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Here it is again.
I found it. It was on the head.
So clearly we have a problem within the market of preteen girls kind of being prioritized, right? But our passion doesn't die. Maybe it morphs, like Rattle says, into something that's bittersweet, but in itself it sort of drives itself further because we're craving it at that point, right?
Yeah.
So why exactly is it that there is this big community? We know that there is this big community, and there isn't well, of course it's changing slowly, but these big game companies aren't providing for us anymore. And I'd like to put sort of a spin on what we were saying before of sort of maybe the the way we sort of solve this more globally is, instead of focusing on just horse people, looking at how we can create horse games that will be playable by people who aren't as obsessed with horses as we are, right? So you take a game like Minecraft. I'm not into mining. I don't do that on a regular basis. I'm not very good at crafting in real life. But anybody can come along and play the game Minecraft. And that's the beauty of the game. So maybe something that we need to consider is sharing sort of that connection, as Rattle was saying before, with the horse. Whether you like dogs or you like cats or whatever it is, if you play a game that's about a dog or about a cat, you become connected to that animal and you grow a bond with it. So perhaps that's something that horse games need to explore more than just let's satiate that craving of horses that we all need, and instead look at a game that can be shared with the wider community to sort of let us, the horse game community, in and not be quite so isolated. Just kind of food for thought.
The point that I made earlier with the section on the adventure and the connection and the stuff, it's role-playing games open up the horse gamers to a wider community. That it's kind of the reverse essentially. So when a game makes, for example, Elder Sign, I'm way more interested. Okay, I love the Dark Souls series, but I'm way more interested in Elden Ring. Sorry, Elder Sign. Where's my head? And Elden Ring than I was before when I heard, oh, this game has a horse. Now I want it because I like the idea of riding a horse in this world. But so making those games, like you said, that's actually a very good point, because when the second that you make a game with a horse, it instantly opens a gate to allow horse gamers to kind of rush in and, like Red Dead Redemption, just completely take it over.
No, that's a really good point. And I did an interesting poll about 7 or 8 months ago, and I was asking people through this poll to build sort of their favorite, like the best horse game that they could ever imagine. And the kind of premise was, it's an open world game, it's got realistic graphics, and people kind of split between just horse activities and also outside activities, such as maybe having a job or wilderness camping, or adding an extra layer to that. And I thought that was really interesting because, okay, Red Dead is not a horse game, but it introduces this idea of there being something more than the horse. If you want a horse that's nice and pretty and you like it, you're going to have to go out and earn some money to buy that horse. And when you buy that horse, you're going to need more money to feed the horse and to put a saddle on the horse that is a nice saddle, right? So it opens you up to more of the game. Something that I think hasn't been done, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know, Rattle, that you won't particularly be interested in this, but I'd love to see a zombie apocalypse game that has you trying to have a bond with this horse. In the zombie apocalypse movies, we've always got people like randomly jumping on horses, or even in The Last of Us, where they have horses. But at the end of the day, they're nothing more than transport. But to have a game where you're having to manage your survival along with this animal's survival, and building that connection of, they can get you away from the danger, but you have to feed them and you have to take care of them and you have to make them better when they're injured. So my question to you guys is sort of, what does your perfect game look like? Does it look like the horse games that we have now, or does it look like something far, far more than that?
Oof. Perfect. I actually. That's a loaded question, Abigail. That's a big question. The current. Okay. Okay. So for me, I'd say the perfect horse game for me is something that allows you to do something with the horse. That's the main thing, but not just train the horse and clean the horse. Good God, please not. But something like Elden Ring, I think, comes close. Darksiders is also a good one. But I'm thinking the one game that in horse game essentials, I think the gold standard of horse games is Alicia Online. Because in that game, it's not just about riding a horse, it's about taking part in it's like seriously fun magic rides, and it's crazy, and there's a luck factor and an X factor, and all the elements kind of come together to make this really fun, excellent game. And it's something that becomes addicting, and it's something that doesn't patronizes me, it doesn't condescend to me, it doesn't expect me to be 3 years old and then understand. If you understand what I'm saying, I don't have to be 5 years old to enjoy this game. I can be 21 or 23 or 30 and still enjoy this game. And that's what I want in horse games. I want it to be something that is fun. So for me, the gold standard is Alicia Online, but something like why do I keep saying something else? But something like Elden Ring or Darksiders, where I'm going on an adventure and I'm battling stuff, like you said with a zombie apocalypse. I hate you so much. Why zombie apocalypse? You know my fear. You know my fear. I hate you so much right now. But anyway, so that's kind of my thing. Going on an adventure, the horse meaning something in your game beyond just freaking transport or a nuisance. And just something like Elden Ring and stuff like that I mentioned before.
For me, besides like the actually wanting to bond with your horse, I wish there was just like actual content besides like you just need to do these disciplines and you just need to do this horse care mini game. Oh, you just need to do the same thing again, but in competition format where it's supposed to be quote unquote serious. I wish there was a bit more interaction in those kind of disciplines, but also have it more spread out in terms of what you do in the world besides being stuck at that ranch area. Because in a lot of these horse games, you're just stuck in these ranch areas and you never really do anything outside of that unless if you're trying to be a fantasy game.
Yeah.
I wish for both realistic and fantasy horse games, they dwell more on actually having stuff outside of the stereotypical, oh, you have horsepower, oh, you have this girl power and stuff. I wish there was actually stuff that you could do with, like, this is why I wish, in terms of how SSO kind of does like combat, I wish you could do combat from your horse more and not just charge and you damage something. I wish there was like actually like substance when it comes to what you do and interact with the world and what you do in certain, say, for say like a fight, or per se when you're interacting with characters. I just wish there was more of that interaction that you do with stuff and things with people, and not just go do this and then you finish it and then you don't really feel anything afterwards. You just feel like you're doing a chore. You're not really doing something that you're going to remember, or actually have like remember the journey that you came along the way.
Exactly, yeah.
Sorry. My sort of perfect game, I would say, is like a combination of Tales of Rain Ravine. I know it's not done, but like the basics of it, combined with like the physics and graphics of Red Dead, you know, like the mocap sort of game where you can hop in, you can do English or Western, you can jump around, you can take your horse on a hack, maybe take it into the McDonald's drive-through for, you know, if you want to. Yeah, just sort of that kind of combo where it allows you to go on a hack or do competitions, have a bit of a real life element to it. You know, maybe your horse has a very big vet bill, you have to find a way to pay that now. Yeah, that sort of thing. Horse race, like, gotta put it down now.
No!
Why?
It's either getting put down or it's getting eaten by zombies. I don't like this segment.
Hey, this is what happens. This is what happens when you don't give me good horse games, okay? This is what happens. So generally, we're all, you know, I think, in general, you know, the horse game community, as you guys have mentioned before, is looking for more. We want more. We need more, and I think it would be really valuable to have people outside the crazy horse girl stereotype to, you know, be included in that. So the final really short topic that I just want to kind of cover is, will the horse game community ever be recognized within the wider game community? My answer for this is right now, no, I don't see that happening. We are not inclusive enough. It's almost like in a lot of games we're behind a couple decades in terms of representation, inclusion, and general customization options. In the future, perhaps, you know, we're seeing a lot of games come up, but generally we need games that are more than just pretty horses. And the reason I say this is, again, I just want to clarify, this is not me tooting my own horn, but the other day I was fortunate enough to blow up on Twitter, and I had basically a lot of people talking about us, the horse game community, that weren't in it, and I'd never seen that before. And reading a lot of the comments were very supportive, and I think they looked at us like they saw how much pure love we had, and how much passion and how much creativity, and it was just something that really touched me, because it reminded me that, you know, in this kind of like bleak wide world where we have all this stuff going on, you know, we have our little corner of the internet and we are doing the things that make us happy, and I think that that's wonderful. And I think in general we have a very positive community, and I think we need to make sure that we have that, and we keep that, and we keep growing that. But on top of that, I think having that inclusion as well, I could imagine there were a lot of people talking in that Twitter thread who were saying, you know, I wish that could be me, and I wish I would love horses that much just so that I could be in the community. And I think we've created quite a nice space here, despite all the drama. I think we have something really, really, really special. So I just wanted to sort of end with a single question for you all. Is what kind of positive interactions have you had within the horse game community that has sort of made you go, wow, this is so cool. I'm so happy to have horsey friends now.
It has to go with when I met my now like my very long best friend from Star Stable, from just a random club invite, and I call her Nick. And this is where I also met my other longtime SSO best friend, Huggy, and we knew each other from like clubs we've been in. And it's cool how when I met them when I was just an 11-year-old playing Star Stable, and growing up, and now we're both like in like our 20s, and basically it's just from the memories that we made from either quote unquote the cringy club drama, or just having memories from doing club events and champs and doing stampedes when that was popular in SSO, and as well as a bunch of other things. It basically just basically opened my eyes of like, hey, there's like people like me that are my age that are in this whole thing, and that I don't have to worry about not having nobody to talk about with that sort of thing. And I'm glad that they're still in my life today and still be able to talk to whenever we can't have the chance, even though not much, because, you know, since we're younger adults, like we're trying to like do college or like have our own jobs and that sort of thing. But I'm just glad that I was able to grow and be able to see how this horse community grew up, especially SSO in itself, and as well as how horse games started to shift in what we want for in an actual horse game.
For a lot of time, I couldn't really find a community. You know, I was sort of used to being like the community being stigmatized as these crazy horse people, as you said, Abby, and like even the sport in its own, like a lot of people look down on horse riding and they think we're a bunch of crazy people on top of animals going in, like, I don't know. But then I found, for example, the trail riding servers that you mentioned, and I got into a community on that, and I sort of started riding around, you know, in Red Dead and chatting, and everybody had, you know, common interests, obviously horses. Yeah, and that was sort of my first introduction into it, and I was like, this is a really cool community, and I can't wait to see what horse people are gonna do with it, and where we go from here.
Mine's a little difficult. I'm a bit of a recluse. I have very few people I actually interact with, and I'm very cautious overall with people. But if I have to say what kind of got to me, I think was the very first video I made was about Star Stable and kind of the issues and stuff. Poor Star Stable. You are doing better. I just want to reiterate that, Star Stable. You are doing better, and I'm very proud of you. But I remember making that video, and it took a long while to pick up. But when it did, I remember these comments that I got of people who were kind of sharing the same frustrations as I was with horse games overall. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself that it was nice that the video meant something, but it was even nicer to know that the thoughts that I was having wasn't isolated. You know, it was there were people out there who kind of felt the same way. And it was fascinating and inspiring to see a passion that kind of just that took flame, you know, so instantly, you know, without any fans or any gasoline thrown on it. It just went as if it was kind of inside of them. They were like, we love horse games and we just want to see better ones, and thank you for making the video and stuff like that. But it was just so inspiring to see people so in love with horse games, and that kind of made me want to keep making games, you know, videos about horse games.
That's really lovely, and I love that, you know, there is a positivity, and I'm not going to say there's never drama, because there is always drama. There's always going to be drama where there are people. But yeah, I think we really do have something special here, and I can't wait for the rest of the world to sort of discover us. And maybe one day we can share that. So, but to segue, I think our community is made up of far more than just preteen girls. We have adults and guys as well, who Nyx will be talking about. Yeah, I can't believe it. Do they exist? I didn't know. I just know horses. That's all I know.
Yes, thank you for that beautiful segue.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're sort of talking about the sort of like common exclusion of boys and men in our lovely horse games. You know, horse games nowadays are kind of well, not even nowadays, but they're usually sort of considered to be stereotypically girly. They're not really marketed towards boys. You know, like the boys usually get, you know, your typical you know, your car games and all of that. If we refer to Moon's lovely chart again, we'll be able to see all the covers with with all the girls on the titles and everything. It creates a sort of unfortunate and slightly unfair situation where a certain gender or even multiple, sort of genders and identities aren't represented. To me, it seems more of an issue in online games, for example, Star Stable again, which we've been,
Star Stable.
or Star Stable. Yeah, no, because it's sort of more odd in multiplayers, in MMOs especially, like concerning how much character creation you usually get. I mean, look at Lord of the Rings, so something like that. You get loads of character creation. You can be a fairy, you can be, whatever. And SSO obviously markets itself as an MMORPG, yet you can only be a girl, which is quite odd. I've sort of got my own little list of offenders or games that do it well I've labeled. But can you sort of name or remember any games that include men or boys, like any memorable sort of games? I mean, horse games, obviously.
My riding stable too. Sorry, that one. My life with horses. You can actually be a boy there.
No way.
Yes, you can. Oh, and a G1 jockey. If you ever want to play a horse game, no one's ever going to play these games. They're amazing games. Go play them. G1 jockey.
That's a good point, though. A lot of the racing games are usually always men, and they actually exclude girls. So that's another sort of issue.
The only one I can think of is Alicia Online, but again, that's very specifically, white males. Of a certain style as well. You don't get much customization, but at least you get a different gender option. At the very bars on the floor here, but at least we got that.
And demon eye color. Yay!
Yay! Always a bonus.
So your girl here, since I've been working on this older horse games, guys, but by the time you see this, it's probably going to be out then.
Here it comes.
So besides Alicia and my writing stables too, we have. This is gonna be a long one. Lucinda Green Equestrian.
Oh.
Let's ride Silver Buckle Stables. Secret of the Magic Crystals. You can be a set boy character. Appassionata. This is gonna be Championship Riding Star. We're gonna have this count Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron Forever Free. It's a very surprising statistic. You never think there will be a boy in these games, but there is.
Okay.
Ride Equestrian Simulator, and I think the very last is I think Riding Club Championship. I could be wrong though, but that is it. So it is a very small statistic. Oh, and excuse me. Welcome to Trottersville. That's the last one. So I probably lost count. There's probably some I missed, but that's about it.
We will have
Besides
a counter on screen.
But it's just generally really not that much.
Yeah.
Yeah, you pretty much listed all the games I had on my own list, so I'll just thank you for that. Then the sort of next little subtopic I'll touch up on is marketing. Because a lot of the older games I've seen usually feature women or girls riding horses on the front cover. They usually, have the sort of fonts and colors which are associated with girly stereotypes. Your big bold pink lettering and sort of that sort of thing. Many of these games are kind of painted in a stereotypical kind of light with these sort of themes and storylines that are kind of overused and they sort of bounce back into that average like a horse or like movie where like a girl comes along to the stable, learns to ride, she falls in love with like a random stable boy, so I think that there's a big issue in the marketing, and considering it being such a horse games being such a niche genre, why do you think that they've decided not to put in the effort and branch out to all sorts of different genders and stuff like that?
I feel like it's because of the main stereotype of, oh, boys are only into like action shooting games and stuff like that. Yeah. When people don't realize that girls are also into that as well, but also not every dude wants to play Call of Duty or Overwatch every hour of the day. Sometimes they just want to relax and play something as simple as Animal Crossing or Minecraft. I feel like people just assume that based on our gender, we like certain things. It's the same goes for TV shows, where in toys as well, where they assume that girls only like dolls and boys only like Hot Wheels or something. When girls can like both, or boys can like one or the other or both as well. And they just assume that we only like certain things and base it off around that to stereotype. I feel like it's generally based on like how society wants us to be as a girl or a boy or a non-binary person. They don't really think about how people have different interests and they change over time. They're not always going to be into dolls or cars for a long period of time. We're going to diversify and fall in love with certain interests outside of that. And it's also kind of like what I said earlier about like that ignorance as well, where they think that this particular target audience is into this game when there's a lot of people outside of that as well.
Oh, yeah, no, I completely agree with what Daniela said. Again, the stereotype of like car guys, super fast, Hot Wheels, Brad, Transformers, Optimus Prime. I'm just throwing out buzzwords here. But then it's the girls, and they have the pink and the Star Stable, and they've got the pink dress-up Barbie dolls, woo, and little tiny children babies. It's the whole. I grew up with that. I think it's better now, but in general, even from very young age, we're sort of taught like what a boy thinks and what a girl thinks. And I think, unfortunately, that horses, weirdly, because you can apparently do that to animals now, have been labeled as girl things. Despite the fact of, they're, huge animals that are actually very dangerous. They've been sort of put in the cutesy, horsey, female section. So I think that might be why.
I have one word for these people who like to put people in boxes: bronies.
That's the name of that MLP community that was outside of that Target.
Yes, but they were like mostly middle-aged men who loved ponies. It's kind of the point is that it's not necessarily you can put people into boxes, but I think I think the thing that's going on is that the horse genre in general is very narrow. It does not branch out away from horse simulators. It doesn't want to branch out from that. It keeps making games where you breed horses, take care of horses, ride horses, breed horses, take care of horses, ride horses. That is the only like streamlined thing that if they can manage to kind of break out of that mold and make games, for example, like Wrestler, where it's a freaking GTA game where you steal horses. It's something different. And I'm gonna use roguelike. Roguelike is a genre that is very small. But do you know how many games there are in roguelikes? There are an enormous amount of games in that genre. But it's a niche genre, and they keep making new, different, interesting things. And I think that's what horse games need to do. They need to break out of the mold and use different genres or ideas and make newer games. That's why I like Alicia Online so much, because it broke a little out of the mold at least.
That's why I also applaud Tales of Ring Ravine, because because based on what we saw like in like the demo and like videos, they're trying to break out of that G-rated product of, oh, we can't have no cussing in a horse game, or oh, we can't have no mature topics in a horse game. But based on like the sliver that we saw with Tales of Ring Ravine, the person making it wants to go outside of that. Oh, we gotta keep this PG, Christian server, all of that jazz. And want to actually try to diversify in having a more mature audience besides the stereotypical prepubescent teens and kids that you see on the internet.
It's almost like these games are scared to market towards boys and men because they know stereotypically they have been given the marketing of themes of war, weapons, guns, that sort of thing, and they might not want to look into a game that is more about care and bonding and that sort of thing. But I'll pop into my next sort of topic, which is online versus single player. Because obviously, in single player games, which is also a theme I see women bring up a lot, about how they aren't represented in female-led characters. Because I think it's completely different to have a horse game that has like a single player story. For example, Imagine Champion Rider is one of my favorite games, and you play as a girl. And I didn't mind at all. I thought it was like a really good story. It was a really good game. Didn't like even I didn't care. I didn't bat an eyelid. But when you have an online game, and I'm going to mention Star again, because really at the moment it's the most sort of known for excluding men and boys in their storyline. And I know a lot of the time they sort of broach the topic that it's a game directed towards women and girls and empowering them, and I think that is super cool. But it would have been better for a single player game, because it's really cool for women to be able to have a game in which they can feel empowered, and like talked about. But for an MMO, an online horse game, you should be sort of given the ability to play whatever gender you please, because men obviously ride horses and everything. So why do you sort of think that an online game wouldn't take the opportunity to branch out to men and boys? Not Star Stable in specific, because there's also there's a new mobile MMO I can't remember the name of now. It has the exact same thing. It's like Star Stable. It doesn't actually. It gives you the option to edit your character, but doesn't give you a male option.
I don't have an answer to that question, but I wanted to sort of give my 2 pence on it. I think that Star Stable could. I'm so sorry, Star Stable, but Star Stable could have done something so incredibly moving and powerful had they had an inclusive game that was still about empowering women, to have inclusivity, to say anybody can play this game no matter the gender, no matter who you are, and then still have a storyline that was about, aren't these women so incredible, they're so intelligent, you've got Linda, you've got Alex, you've got these potentially very strong characters. Why wouldn't you take the opportunity to have little boys, let's say, grow up seeing this as an example and saying, wow, girls can be strong, girls can be smart, girls can be all of these things that stereotypically, we're told we're not. And I don't know why they haven't done that. I think, again, it harks back to the stereotype of, this. I think they've backed themselves into a corner with saying, oh, we're trying to create an empowering space for women by excluding men, and I don't think that has ever worked in the history of anything. Let's exclude this minority and make them further away from society. I don't think that's ever worked, so I don't think it's working now.
No.
I feel like specifically in Star Stable's case, they're stuck in the past of there's not representation for girls. Because in terms of video games, over the years, we have seen games starting to grow more with having female leads or having females properly represented in games. For example, with Red Dead, I believe the character's name is Sadie. I forgot her last name, but I believe it does a good job of having a male protagonist, but also showing a strong female character that's important to the story. And I feel like what SSO stuck with is basically I feel like SSO is so narrow-minded in how they're writing their game. They're basically assuming that the stuff in their game is only something a girl can do. And this is why I tell people that a boy and a girl can still go and get that golden apple and give it to P to turn her back into human. A boy or girl can still go and save On from Pandoria. A boy or girl can still go and save Justin or meet Justin. This is why I also saw, when I saw Matt Harnick play Star Stable, the comment at the bottom basically talked about how they should have just been have them as an equal playing field and not make one gender better than the other. That doesn't do anything. And if anything, that just makes them feel inferior. It doesn't solve the issue of inclusivity. SSO thinks they're solving the inclusivity issue by having only girls being able to have a girl character, but that doesn't solve the issue. You're still playing into that stereotype that horse games are for girls only and that only girls can play this. And that's why I feel like they're so ignorant to that boys and non-binary people can play this game as well, and that they have played this game for years. And it's not going to hurt their story if they have a male character option. If anything, that's just going to strengthen the inclusivity and be able to give, hopefully, because if boys that have not touched this game, a chance to learn about how women can be so empowering, like as you said, Abigail, and as well as the importance of having gender inclusivity and gender equality. And it just makes me really upset that they think that it's only something that a girl can do in this game that's going to mess it up, when I can deter everything that's not going to mess up Star Stable as a whole.
The thing that kind of, yeah, actually what you're saying is that they limit their story. It's kind of what it comes down to. They take out. Yeah, it's what you said. It's frustrating because it's exactly what you said. It's like you said, a girl can do it. A girl can do it. Or sorry, a boy can do it. A boy can do it. It just makes me crazy. But the thing,
that's why, like I guarantee you, if we were here long, I would go in depth of I would tear down every single thing of saying oh boy, this is why we can't have boys in this game. I can tear down every single reason. Like, for example, the dating one, honey. Literally, in almost most of the MMOs in this game, there has been dating, and there has been stuff said by boys and girls. Yeah. It's not gonna go away. There's never going to be a game where we're gonna have no dating happen. It's just, I'm being realistic. It's gonna happen.
But the thing that gets me with, I'm sorry, Star Stable. I'm gonna have a swear jar for Star Stable on screen. I'm just saying, every time we say, we're just gonna pop in a penny in there. But the thing is with Star Stable is the thing that upsets me, especially in recent stories, is that they like to paint boys and men as either stupid, ignorant, or incompetent, and I don't like that. I don't like that. I played Tomb Raider. But I played the old Tomb Raider, on the PS1, where she had pixel boobs. It was very funny.
Oh, love that.
Love it. When she kind of jumped straight up, it was just really weird. But anyway, so I played Tomb Raider, and she was a really cool female character. And what I love about her is today they make her very angsty. But back then, she was the biggest badass ever. She literally wrote off her parents, and she just went on an adventure, and she wrote books, and she became rich on her own. She's screw society. I'm you're freaking awesome. I want to be
That's
you.
That's amazing.
But the thing is what I think the mistake that Star Stable is making is beyond the fact that they kind of keep girls, we're strong and we're powerful, because they make all the villains incompetent and stupid. It takes away from the girls' empowerment.
Yes. Yeah.
So
yes, if you look at Mr. Kimball, you're supposed to be he's one of the antagonists of the stereotypical mob boss owner that wants to tear down stuff and build stuff on the environment. But they make him sound so stupid with the way he acts, with throwing a tantrum and not actually having compelling arguments. And especially in the most recent thing, the most recent appearance in the racetrack remodeling, he just sounds so stupid, saying oh, I own this thing, an actual male Karen. And it just sounds so stupid. They don't actually make them smart. In terms of smartness, the closest thing is at least Professor Hayden for the most part, since he's actually studied and stuff.
Yeah.
But in terms of most of the male characters in this game, they're very stupid.
There's a really cool argument that I absolutely love when it comes to Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. And so the argument goes, Watson cannot be stupid, because if Watson is stupid, then it means Sherlock Holmes only has average intelligence, because Watson cannot understand him. And if Watson is stupid and he cannot understand Holmes, it doesn't mean Watson it doesn't mean Holmes is intelligent. It means Holmes has an average intelligence. And that's what they do with girls. They make us average because they make all the villains idiots. Stop doing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's a strong point, actually. I haven't had it presented like that, but that's right on the nail on the head.
Oh.
That was good.
No, you guys have perfectly summarized everything I was trying to say. It was very eloquent. You have games now like Red Dead Redemption 2 Online. It proves that there's a substantial player base of men wanting to play and be involved in these, horse communities. I had a graphic somewhere.
Ooh.
That's sort of it'll probably pop up on screen now. From Astride, they recently introduced bot roles for your pronouns. I know pronouns aren't the perfect way to gauge a binary sense, but it's a good idea, right? And for she, her, there were 782 people that had picked up the role, and for he, him, there was only 126.
wow.
And that's only a recent sort of thing they put on the server. So already you can see there's quite a big divide between men and women, or girls and boys, who are playing these games. So obviously they aren't being marketed towards. They don't know about these games, or they might even feel sort of ostracized, and they might feel like, if I pick up this game, I'm going to be made fun of by other boys or men or whatever. And yeah, it's just sort of annoying. Because as I said, it's great for single player horse games to have female led characters. Because obviously, I bet there's a lot of male led characters where women would prefer to play as a woman.
Sorry, can I just butt in here real quick? I've actually seen a video that a guy was doing, and he was actually in the Red Dead trail riding community, and he had posted this video of him riding with this trail ride community. And at the beginning of the video, it was quite hard to watch because it really sounds like he's trying to apologize, maybe not apologize, but he's trying to make it seem like he also thinks, you know, this trail riding community is cringe, but, you know, it's kind of fun, ha ha ha. You know, it kind of seemed like, it's almost like I imagined that he had friends that were going to watch this video, and he had to make them believe that he also thought it was cringe, so it's fine to make fun of it, but, like, you know, it was kind of fun, ha ha ha. And it felt kind of, it kind of hurt me, because it was like, that's the kind of thing that's painful to see, because you just know that there are people who are going to make fun of him for it, and there are going to be people who stop him from truly embracing the fact that he just likes riding on Red Dead. There's nothing wrong with that, but he felt the need to almost apologize for it and pretend that he didn't like it. So that was a very good point that you brought up, Nyx, about being embarrassed about being in this community.
If I can share a really cool story I saw online the other day. It was so cool. There was this person I don't know if you guys have seen this meme, but there's this post, but there's this girl on Tumblr who essentially said she's really upset that whenever you have like a girl who rides horses, it's all, oh, she's a crazy horse girl. But when you hear a guy who rides horses, it's like, oh, he's a badass cowboy. And she gets so frustrated with that. But then someone replied, and this is the most epic reply. She said, during the shooting of Lord of the Rings, with the charge that they did on the third movie with Return of the King, they had to find riders. Oh no, the second one, Twin Towers. Like, they had to find riders, and so they scoured like everywhere for riders, and they couldn't find male riders. 70% of the Rohan army are women, because those are the only people who could ride. So
I like that.
I love it. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Yay for horse girls. Sorry, Nyx. I'm throwing you under the bus, but yeah, it was kind of cool.
I'm so sorry.
No problem.
But in terms of like a story, because kind of like Abigail's story kind of reminded me of a story of like, this is SSO related, but I remember like when I was looking through the comments section of one of these, it was just like a person just asking like, hey, is it possible to have male characters? And then just like a sea of just like SSO white knights just gutting that response over the fact that no, it has to be it's targeted towards girls, like, you know, the stereotypical arguments. So then I thought, like, I couldn't just stand by and look at it, so I just basically stood up for that person and like basically in a long paragraph broke down like why it's doable for a guy to be in this game and that sort of thing. And then I think I didn't see this until like a couple months later, because I was doing like college stuff. That person actually sent a DM to me explaining like, thank you for actually standing up for me and actually speaking of everything that's been on my mind. And I just find it sad that there's probably like people on Star Stable, or just people that are men or non-binary that's in the horse gaming community, here to speak out about wanting inclusivity on their gender because of how people are just going to just gut down on like, no, this is only for girls only. And it just found sad because like basically he like kind of like, as I said like earlier, like I want to be able to like be like that voice, since I understand what it feels like to have like being talked down to on like what you want to say. And it just hurt my heart hearing that this was like what was on his mind, and that he just wanted somebody to be able to listen. But yeah,
I'll just wrap it up now, because I've got my last issue, which is actually, is it a big issue? Personally, I don't think it's like a ginormous like big issue. I wouldn't like kick up a fuss about it. I think it's just obviously, especially in online games, it's nice to have. For example, I had situations in Star Stable where I'd be wandering around. I made a lovely looking girl character. I didn't even bother trying to make her look masculine or anything. And I'd go up to a person, and it'd sort of be this like 50-50 scenario of like, do I tell them I'm a guy? Do I not tell them? Because I'd have mixed reactions every time. I'd either tell them and they'd be like, oh ew, or I wouldn't tell them, and then down the line I would tell them and they'd be like, well, why didn't you tell me? Now I feel uncomfortable. And then it's sort of like you could so easily avoid that interaction by just going the extra mile, and you know, giving people the extra option. So yeah, it'd be nice if companies sort of started marketing and creating games geared towards a sort of even like a non-binary audience. Just let you decide what you want to be, especially if it's like a character choice-based setting. You know, Astride is an upcoming game. It looks like it's going to do that sort of thing, which looks promising. Tales of Ravine, I don't know if they're planning on including...
No,
No, they said they're not going to. No, unfortunately,
it's a
not.
story. That's why.
Yeah, but again, with the sort of story-driven games, it's usually a lot better. But I just thought, as a sort of last question, how do you think this sort of topic, like, how does it like play like an encompassing part in horse games in their future?
I feel like it plays in a part in terms of if the horse game genre is actually inclusive. Because, yes, we have like a lot of these statistics showing that there's this percentage of boys playing this game and non-binary people playing this game. But it also brings the question of, were horse games really trying to be inclusive? Because, especially like talking about how they don't really, like based on like how like they've written female or male characters in these kind of games, it basically just brings the question if people really think about if they want to actually have an equal audience. Because based on how men are portrayed in game most of the time for horse games, it just bothers me how when it comes to the community itself, it doesn't really represent the community fully. Horse games, in my opinion, I feel like they don't really represent the community's potential, because it only represents like one demographic, which is teen girls. They don't really try to represent people that are older or people that are not girls. And I wish there was horse games that actually show that, hey, we actually have more than the stereotypical kids that play this game. And I think people need to realize that and actually question, especially SSO, on if they're trying to be inclusive or if they're just trying to do it for the sake of money and seem like they are girly and that they're perfect for a girl.
Well, I promise not to bite into SSO now, but yeah, no, I just think had you asked that question 10 years ago, I think the answer would have been different. But as we, move into the future, pronouns, people's identity is a very big talking point, and I think it is important. Specifically pronouns are very important to many people, so having a game where you can't help but assume somebody's pronouns are she, her, it becomes a bit of a problem. And as we move into the future, I know Rattle said before, like, games like Star Stable are very old, but as we move into the future, I think it's really important that these games move with us. And while, some people can easily fob it off to be, oh, well, it doesn't really matter, just play the game sort of thing. If you are claiming, as some games do, to be an MMORPG, whether it's debatable or not, then you still, you can't say you can be whoever you want to be except a boy or a non-binary character, because that's not particularly that's not very forward thinking. So yes, I do think that it will play a big part in the future, especially for games labeled MMORPGs.
I think that I personally think that if they are okay. I get angry, so I have to calm myself down. Okay, so I think if they add men to horse games, like that option, it will like we said, okay, let's take it from the other side. Like we said earlier, when they add horses to games that aren't horse games, it opens the gates to girls to come into those games and play those games, right? I think we're
Yes.
okay with that.
Yes.
So if they
Yeah.
if they add a male figure in horse games, it instantly opens the game for men to play those games. So we
Yeah.
instantly widen that audience, and we instantly get men to actually be, of boys, to become more interested in something that girls are interested in. And I think that isolating, like you said earlier, Abigail, they isolate them, and that's the thing that I cannot stand. They make the idea of a horse game as something to look down on, as something to belittle, to laugh at, to pretend that it's nothing more than just something that we do to pass the time or make a joke out of. And if they added more men into those games, opened those doors, not patronize the game players, essentially not make it into something that's girly and cute, but something that is more generic, something that more people will be able to open up to, we're going to see more gamers, more people that appreciate these games and won't look down on them. So yes, I think opening these games to a wider audience is an absolute must, especially for boys. Sorry, I went on a tangent.
That was good. No, I agree with that. That was a good tangent.
You could literally be making more money, like even from a money making standpoint, by getting more people into the game. Like everybody said, it's a niche genre. There's not that many people, even though there's quite a lot. It's just weird, you know.
I think that in horse games there is a wider potential than is often granted to them. I think that due to the fact of closed-minded individuals or people who have, sacks over their heads and refuse to see it, they don't notice the potential that lies within horse games. But for some reason they are willing to see it within an RPG. And I think that if the people who can see the potential in an RPG with a horse, and they can see the same potential in a horse game, then our horse games would grow into something beyond the niche that it has been driven into by people who refuse to even give it a chance. I think that if they are willing to just open up the gates to these games, we will see the passion that this community has grow exponentially, and horse games will be propelled into something that people can appreciate and not only look down on. But that lies within the developers to do that. That is not our job to do it. And we can, and with Astride and all these other games coming out, I do feel a sense of hope for the future, that it is finally going to be growing into something that we can all look at with pride and not something that we're kind of ashamed of.
I think a sort of low bar was set like very early on, and now we're so slowly sort of finally managing to get over that like low sort of quality of games, and like we're making better, more inclusive, better looking games, horse games obviously, and it casts a really good look into the future for what's to come. Like, I mean, we're getting so many new games coming out that look really, really good, and I'm so excited to see what people are going to be able to do with them. And then going on in the future, I mean, maybe we'll end up with some kind of Red Dead looking game. Who knows? It's fun to sort of peer into the future and see what will happen.
I feel like in terms of based on how we've looked at all of these horse games, I feel like considering how over time we've never really, ever since that huge big golden age boom of horse games, we haven't had that kind of boom in years, and that's the truth. And going forward, I wish that horse game people that like companies that are capable of being able to bring something like this to life, of what people have been aching for, what they've been dreaming of for a horse game, to actually take that thought and do it, and not just have people do it just because they want to do it for the sake of, oh, I can do it better. Which is why I feel like now going forward, when it comes to horse games, and how in the beginning, where you think from once you started when you were a kid that, oh, these are fun, but as you grow older, you start to see the flaws a lot of them have over time. And especially when you look at MMO related ones, it even correlates to how so far in the past that they're all relatively the same formula, and not doing something different that has a big enough impact for the bigger gaming community to be like, hey, there's this sort of game genre that looks really cool, we should try it. And I feel like the day that we finally do something that's impactful with being more inclusive and having an actual good-looking game with actual good content and engaging interactions that make it memorable enough, it will be able to actually make a huge impact on the whole gaming community as a whole, to have that bigger part be able to see us and actually hear us. Because at the end of the day, what not only we crave for a better horse game, but we want people to hear us, to hear our voices and hear our wants, so that way we can actually feel equal and inclusive as a video game genre.
Yeah, just hearing everybody's thoughts and points on this has really been eye-opening, and thank you for that. But something I kind of like to take away from this is just that the horse game community, I think, is genuinely something really special, and we all have this seemingly undying passion for horses, whether or not we get to be with them in real life or not. But one thing we have to be very, very careful of is to not gatekeep this community by excluding people and by creating this special bubble that only we can enter, and instead opening, as Rattle said, the gates for other people to join in and for us to share that passion and that enthusiasm to the average gamer. And maybe then we will be able to see these companies actually take us, the gaming community, seriously and provide us with some really, really exciting content. We have a long way to go, but we've also come a really long way. So I think we can all say that we're very, very proud of ourselves. So thank you.
Oh, wow. All of these points are so beautiful.
Yeah. I didn't cuss not one time.
You did.
I actually did.
You did twice. You did twice. You owe me $2.
What? Please.
Don't worry.
I thought I actually didn't cuss for what? I was so proud. I actually even wrote this, man.
Don't worry. With the swear jar, Star Stable swear jar, we're good. We're all gonna owe a lot of money. Well, that is the podcast in a nutshell. Thank you to Abigail, Moon, and Nyx for joining me today. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate this. I think we all had a lot of fun.
Yes.
A terrible time. I'm not coming back ever again.
Oh God,
Terrible.
I'm so sorry. Damn it. Okay, well, at least 2 are coming back. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. But thank you all so much. I think we had some wonderful insights in this podcast and some wonderful points that were brought up. And we can only say that we hope that the companies start listening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Anyway, okay, I think we can say bye. Just say bye. Bye, guys.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.